好的，各位与会的贵宾，大家好，大家午安。我们预计再过5分钟要开始我们今天的下午场的台以论坛，2018年台以论坛。那么在这边呢，也贴心的提醒您，我们有个好消息，就是呢，明天在三创，我们要邀请到大家来参加我们的创新交流茶会。我们邀请创业的团队、新创的团队来参加我们的创新交流茶会，在三创，在明天要与今天的讲者来做深度的交流、深度的对谈。那么怎么样参加呢？扫描 QR code 就可以获得邀请函。谢谢。好，在这边也提醒大家，麻烦手机关震动静音的模式。谢谢您，谢谢。So, ladies and gentlemen, we shall be starting our 2018 Taiwan-Israel Intertech Summit in about 5 minutes. Please be seated and please switch your cell phone to silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation. 好的，各位长官、各位贵宾、各位与会的好朋友们，大家好，大家午安，欢迎莅临我们2018台以论坛。那么我们这边呢是分场 B， 我们的主题呢是创新科技新视野。Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to 2018 Taiwan-Israel Innotech Summit. Now this is session B, of which the theme is integrating innovative technology into life.Our organizer, 我们的主办单位是科技部 the Ministry of Science and Technology. 我们的执行单位呢是数位时代 Business Next Media is our execution company. And we are inviting the experts and professionals of iconic professionals, iconic entrepreneurs to share with us all about the key technology in healthcare technology. We call it the health tech. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us welcome our keynote speech number 1. 我们欢迎我们的专题演讲1，资安大跃进工业控制系统的 AI 应用。The theme of keynote speech number 1 is applying artificial intelligence to the security of industrial control system. Please join me in welcoming from Israel, Radiflowe, Mr. CEO, Mr. Ilan Barda. With our applause, 掌声欢迎 Shalom.
Thank you very much. Thank you.Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here. As said, my name is Ilan Barda and I'm the CEO and the founder of Radiflowe. Actually, it's the second time for me here in Taiwan. I was here about 12 years ago when I was managing a business unit in Nokia Siemens, so I came here to meet with Chango Telecom. But it was not a very fruitful visit because most of the time was a typhoon, so I just spent most of it in the hotel.But luckily now it looks much better, so I hope to enjoy your beautiful country a bit more. I will talk about OT security, which is security for industrial control systems, and then how do we include doesn't work well?
We want to hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
So may I allow you to adjust this a little bit? But are you comfy?
Yeah, it's fine. Okay.
Better?
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. So as said, I will focus on cybersecurity for industrial control systems, what is called nowadays OT, and I will explain a bit about the evolution of this market, and then a bit how do we apply AI into this market, which is a very complicated issue, a very delicate issue because of the conflict between what you can achieve with the AI and some of the challenges with AI, which are very problematic in some cases. When you are looking about the very conservative industrial control systems where they need to make sure that their operation is not interrupted. So first of all, when we are talking about industrial control systems, there were a lot of names along the years. There was the issue of calling it machine to machine. There was industrial control system, ICS, SCADA. There were a lot of names used over the years. And nowadays it's mostly popular to call it OT, meaning like there is IT for many years. Now to distinguish the things which are related to the industrial control system, they call it OT, the operational technology, all the things which are related to all the modern automation of the industrial control systems are called in a simple way the OT networks or the OT systems. So that's in general what you will hear as the overall acronyms more and more being used these days. And like many other technologies, once you start to deploy it more and more, you have an issue of cybersecurity. And nowadays there is a whole segment, a whole market, which is about OT security. How to secure these industrial automation systems, these industrial automation networks. They become more and more modern, they become more and more open. A lot of communication, a lot of computers, a lot of things are being automated. A lot of value around it, but also a lot of cybersecurity risks. And this is where we need to make sure that we are applying the right types of solutions. So when we are talking about Radiflowe, we actually started already in 2010, focused first of all on communication for industrial control systems, and then in 2014, we shifted our focus specifically into the cybersecurity for the industrial control systems because we have seen that that's a place where we can bring some unique value. In the communication area, it was becoming more and more kind of a commodity, kind of a standard type of solution. In cybersecurity for this area of the industrial control systems, there are still many things which are unique. So that's where we are focusing. You can see here, since 2014, we have tens of deployments throughout the world. Most of it is currently in critical infrastructure. That's where we currently see that customers are either forced by regulation from the government, or they understand the importance of their operations, so they are willing to pay and invest not just in the tools, but also in the manpower, education, and so on, in the area of the cybersecurity for their critical systems. The next step will probably be into the manufacturing area, but there, because it's a private manufacturing, it is more of a challenge how to justify the return of investment, the overall area of the cybersecurity. So it's still a market which is still ramping up, still more into the future. So this is a summary of what we are doing. We are working with all kind of major power, water, oil and gas companies, some of the big service providers which are offering this kind of services to this kind of customers and so on. And as said, it's still relatively in its early phases. Most of the customers are deploying it now on only part of their networks, and they are still learning how to adjust to these new technologies, and then they will deploy it on a mass scale. Some of the things that we have done throughout the last months, and they are to some extent representative of what is also happening in the industry. The first thing on the left-hand side, you can see a deployment that we have done in the US for a power utility. And this was a deployment that was because they were enforced by the regulation, by the government regulation, to deploy cybersecurity in all of their substations of the power utilities. So they were going to smaller and smaller locations. The regulation was in the past mainly on their big power plants, the nuclear plants, and so on. Now it's going into the smaller and smaller places, and this is, you need a different type of a solution like we are providing. But that's important because it was on one hand driven by regulation. On the other hand, what we are trying also to discuss with the customers is the fact that if you already have the trigger by the regulation, you better do more than the regulation. Regulation is usually quite basic in terms of the security. You better take the opportunity and make it one step forward and make sure that you are also deploying a cybersecurity solution that is also useful and effective in terms of the cybersecurity, not just ticking the checkbox. And this is what we have done with this utility in Oklahoma in the US, and this is what we are trying to duplicate with other customers, not just go for the basic compliance, go one step further. What we have seen later on in February this year was a very interesting trend that attacks on IT networks, all kind of generic malwares of IT networks, are actually also attacking the OT, the industrial systems, because there is more and more connectivity. And on the downside, many of the even standard computers that are being used in these OT networks are not really up to date with their security. So if you can see there Windows XP, of course, with not a relevant level of patching, not with a relevant antivirus and so on. So actually they are becoming even more vulnerable than many of the IT systems. So what we have seen in this case, it was a real wastewater facility, an operational one, that actually was infected. Some of the computers there were infected by a malware that was about cryptocurrency, mining more cryptocurrency in free of charge because it's not your own computers, just using computers that are exposed in the internet. And because they had connectivity for remote maintenance, the computers were infected. And then it was starting to make a real impact on the operational of the operation of this site. So it was becoming a real operational risk. And this is a trend that we see now more and more. Part of this connectivity is actually bringing more and more risks which were actually designed for the IT, not necessarily for the OT, but the OT is becoming, to some extent, an easier target than some of the IT networks. So we need to make sure that we are applying the right level of security for this kind of devices. Another thing that we see as part of this combination between the IT and the OT networks is that there is also a trend of combining the IT security and the OT security. In the beginning, it was very dedicated types of solutions for OT security because you need to do things which are dedicated, understanding the behavior of the industrial processes and so on. But nowadays, we start to see a trend of some level of convergence. What we have done around the May timeframe was a collaboration with the Palo Alto Networks, which is probably the largest cybersecurity vendor nowadays. they are deploying their firewalls all over the place, including some industrial control networks. So their firewalls are being used, even if just by using the standard IT rules, they are being used also to secure some of the industrial control networks. And what we have done in the collaboration with them is to take the information from their firewalls, which is running on a basic IT level, and run some additional analytics, which is specific for the industrial processes. So just based on the information that they already process, we can provide some deeper analytics, which is very specific for the industrial processes, and make sure that the customer is getting this deeper level of analytics, this deeper level of value. So this is a trend that we see in terms of this convergence between the IT and the OT, and we believe that it will continue and will become more and more important for customers. Another area that we have just announced last month was a collaboration with the ST Engineering from Singapore nearby, where they are manufacturing some industrial systems, mainly for metro rails. Actually, I understand that many of the metro lines here in Taiwan are built by ST Engineering. So what we have done, the collaboration with them, was to integrate our cybersecurity as a standard component into their industrial systems. So once they deploy a new metro line, it will already include the cybersecurity as part of it, which will mean that for the operator, it will be integrated into the existing solution. You don't need to train dedicated people on a dedicated tool on a dedicated screen. Everything is integrated into the industrial system, which is a big benefit for the operator. And for us, of course, it makes sense that it will be part of the standard sale of a solution, not a standalone process, because if you take it to a standalone process, it's always a lower priority, it's always a risk, a conflicting risk with the ongoing operations. So if you do it from day one, integrated into the industrial system, then it's much easier to operate and much easier to integrate it into the system. So these are just a few things that we have done in the last few months. Actually, in the next few days, we will have another announcement about a vulnerability that we have found in the some of the Schneider Electric devices. It was published today by Schneider Electric, and we will elaborate about it in the next few days. This is showing that on one hand, there are more and more vulnerabilities found in the industrial control devices. So this is becoming more and more standard for people to do some research and some investigation on some of these industrial controllers. And unfortunately, you can find a lot of vulnerabilities in these devices. On the other hand, when you talk to the operators, to a power utility, it takes them more than a year to deploy a new patch. When they get from Schneider Electric nowadays a new patch to fix the vulnerability that we have found, it will take them more than a year to deploy it in their network. So there is here a big challenge on how to handle this gap from the time that there are more and more vulnerabilities being raised to the time that you deploy it in the field, which is a whole area that we will not discuss now, but there is a whole area of called virtual patching. How do you secure the devices without really doing the patching and so on? So that's another trend that we start to see now becoming more and more important. So what we are talking about when we are talking about an industrial control system, this is a standard way how to show this kind of an industrial control system, and it varies to some extent whether it's a chemical process or whether it's a assembly line of a car or whether it's a power utility. But these are the standard layers. It's called the Purdue model. It has these 5 layers, which are considered and standard when you're looking from the physical layer, the place where there is actually some physical work, a robot that is moving something, a sensor that is checking the temperature and so on, up to the levels of the devices that are doing what is called the real-time control, the things which are moving these robots and getting the information from these sensors, and getting more and more sophisticated algorithms, but on the other end, less and less real-time. So as you go upper in the layers, it's less real-time. It's not something that is controlling the hand of the robot on every cycle. It's something that is changing the project, the plan for the manufacturing plan every 8 hours, for example. So this is the logic of these layers, and this is a typical kind of topology. What you can see here is also the places, and this is just some of the places where you can find potential vulnerabilities in this kind of network. So when we started all this area of OT security, it was mainly focused about one thing, You have computers in the upper layer. These computers usually are less secure than the standard IT computers because they are not up to date with all the patches and so on. Make sure that there is no unauthorized access to these devices, and then the assumption is that your network, the overall network, all the layers will be secure. Nowadays, as you can see, you have vulnerabilities going from level 1 and up, which means that nowadays it's clear that you can attack in all different ways, in all different layers. There are ways nowadays, like the vulnerability that we found in the Schneider device, that you can actually attack the PLC, the lower level, the level 1. You can actually attack this device. You can put, for example, a software, a firmware, in this device, which is doing something that is not supposed to do. The very famous Stuxnet case in Iran, in the Siemens devices, was exactly doing this. There was a logic in the firmware that was reporting something different to the higher layer while doing something different to the level 0, to the actual control system. So nowadays it's clear that you can attack devices in all the layers, so you need to make sure that also your cybersecurity solution is taking care of all these layers. It's not just about if I protect this unauthorized access, if I don't allow a third-party technician or I don't allow my IT people to connect to the ERP system, then it's okay. This is not enough anymore. You need to make sure that all through the layers you have the relevant types of cybersecurity, because an attacker can come in any one of these layers in multiple ways, whether it's remote, whether it's embedded in a device, whether it's a technician that is visiting the site and so on. So there are so many ways to exploit some of these vulnerabilities, so you need to make sure that your cybersecurity is in a much more holistic kind of way. Another thing which is important to understand when we are talking about OT security, security for industrial control systems, the OT networks, the OT applications are very different than the IT networks. You cannot take a solution that was designed for IT networks and just deploy it on the industrial systems, and there are many reasons here, just a few reasons for the differences. For example, confidentiality is not very important in industrial systems. The information that is passing between the machines, it shouldn't be encrypted. It's not important that it will be encrypted. It should be authenticated with some signature, some validation, but the actual encryption of the data is not very important. In IT networks, banks, and so on, of course, it's much more important. So there are many differences in terms of the availability of the system. This is the most important issue in the industrial systems. If a system of generating oil, for example, is going down, it's every minute costs a lot of money, and usually also to restart the system, it's a process of several hours. So every minute of a downtime is very critical, just costs directly money. In your IT network, if your computer went down for a few minutes, probably it's not a disaster. You can just go get some coffee, and by the time you are back, it's working, so it wasn't a big damage. So there are many differences between what's important on the OT network and what is important on the IT network. Even on the infrastructure, if you're looking on the operating systems, you can use the latest Windows and Linux and so on the IT networks. In the industrial systems, first of all, you will find Windows and Linux and Unix, but you will find them very old versions. You will find Windows XP very popular in many of these systems. And you will also find some very unique, dedicated embedded systems, which make it very difficult to run an antivirus, for example, or any kind of a whitelisting software on these devices, because these are not standard kind of operating systems. And the other thing which is also very standard in the industrial systems is that it will take a long time to run any patch. As I mentioned before, one of our customers told us that it will take them at least 1 year to deploy a patch on their network, and they will only do it if it's very important. Because even after 1 year of designing and testing and deploying it, it is really still a big headache for them. So they will prefer to defer it to 2-3 years, and which means that replacing the devices is probably a 15 years cycle, while in the IT department, if you have a laptop that is more than 3 years, you already think that something is wrong with the organization. So there are many differences between the IT and the OT, which means that also the kind of the solutions that you can deploy in the industrial networks, needs to be dedicated for the industrial control systems. They need to be also interactive with the IT solutions, but they cannot be the standard IT solutions just deployed in the OT solution, in the OT networks. They need to be designed in a dedicated way for that, understanding the different types of protocols, the different types of operating systems, making sure that availability is not affected, and so on. So when we are looking on deploying solutions for industrial control systems, we look on, in general, our main motive is make sure that it's easy for the customer to deploy it. For most of these industrial operators, cybersecurity is just a big headache. They don't want to deal with it if they don't have to, and there wasn't a real risk. This is not their priority. They don't want to learn about it. It's not interesting for them. Going now for an electric engineer that was working on a power plant for 20 years and now trying to teach him what are the differences between IDS and IPS and signatures and whitelisting, not very interesting for him, and probably will not be very successful also in terms of trying to explain the differences. So you need to make sure that the overall process is as easy as possible, as seamless as possible for them. So what we are focusing on are two things in terms of making it easy. First thing is what you see here is to go through the whole life cycle of the customer. Meaning that when we come to a customer, usually the customer will not have already the right know-how of what is his network topology, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the types of solutions that he needs to deploy, what is the architecture, and so on. They are just saying, I need something for my risk of cybersecurity. So we usually start from the mapping process, from doing an assessment for the customer, before we start to offer solution X or solution Y, and how do they communicate, and so on. First of all, just make sure that you know what you have. Before you know what are your problems, you cannot really solve them. So that's the first step, which is very important when going to customers in this market. First of all, starting by doing an assessment, by doing a mapping, so you and your customer will understand what are the challenges that you are facing. The second thing that we are providing, and we find it very useful for customers, is that if you are looking on IT security, you can easily deploy 10 or 12 types of very niche kind of solutions for each kind of the problems, the whitelisting, the antivirus, the IPS, and so on. And this is okay for IT people because they have the experts to manage them. In the OT area, again, this is not their priority. Usually the manpower to handle this is very limited. So we need to make it simple. So we try to bring them the complete solution, both a detection system and a prevention system, so they can build a mix and match where they need to place a prevention system because they have some remote maintenance from some external third party, and where they are on the other end very concerned about their availability, about the real-time performance, so they just deploy a passive detection system just to make sure that they are not having any anomalies in terms of the behavior of this network. So you need to have the flexibility about how to deploy these types of solutions. And the other thing that is very important, after you deploy a security solution, again, most of these people are not experts on cybersecurity, you need to make sure that you provide also an incident response plan. How do you take care of an event when it's being raised? If you have hundreds of events and you don't have the right training and you don't have the right reporting system, then probably very quickly the system will be useless. It was very famous in the case of the Target attack in the US. There were a few alerts early on in the process that somebody was trying to hack into their network, but it was just lost in hundreds of other events. Especially in the industrial network, they already have enough headache on the industrial process. If they get hundreds of cybersecurity events, they will not do anything with it. So you need to make sure that your cybersecurity events are very specific, very clear, and we'll touch on it again afterwards in the AI part, because this is one of the biggest challenges of how to include AI in this kind of networks. Another thing that we have done in order to ease the deployment of these industrial control security solutions is to make it very easy to integrate it into the existing networks. The existing networks have been there for 10 years, they probably will stay for another 10 years. Saying that you need to replace now all of your computers, for example, to install our system is not going to work. Saying that you need to change all the communication infrastructure to more modern switches to allow us to deploy all kind of virtual appliances is not going to work. You need to make sure that you are flexible enough to deploy it into their existing topology. And here we are working on two layers. The lower layer is the layer of how do you connect to the existing network, whether they have a switch that can provide you the required information, whether they have a firewall that can provide you the required information, or any other kind of an appliance where you can get the required information to run your analytics. And if not, we provide our own probes that can connect to the network in multiple ways in order to get this feed of information. So you need to make sure that you have a multiple type of solutions in order to connect to the networks, whether it's on-site, whether it's remote, whether it's multiple sites, small sites, big sites. There are many variants. You need to make sure that you are ready, and this is some of the unique aspects of the OT networks, that you are ready for it when you are providing the solution. The other part which is very important is where do you report your alerts? For the standard in the IT networks is you have a security solution in a big enterprise, you should have a SOC, you should have a security solution operating center. And there will be the analysts, they will analyze all the events, they will get events from different tools, they will do the correlation and so on and so forth. So this is the standard integration with all the security center. Most of the industrial customers, when they start to look on a security solution, they don't have a SOC. They might have a SOC on the IT side of the enterprise, but in many cases the IT side of the enterprise is not taking care of the operational side, and in most cases they don't even like each other too much, so they are not very open to having the IT people integrated into their networks, using the same SOC and so on. It's not very popular. So you need to make sure that you are also flexible in this area. And what we have done, this is the integration that we have done with the ST Engineering just a few months ago, is that you can report the cybersecurity alerts into the operational system. So the same system, the same HMI, the same industrial management system, which is already deployed there, and the customers and the operators, anyhow they look at it 24/7, they know what they are looking at, they know how to operate it. We just add another color, like they have gray, red and green. Now they also have blue, which means that there is a cybersecurity issue on the existing devices, on the existing icons, in the existing flow of operation of their systems. So this is very important, again, to make it easy for them to deploy it. If you require them to build a dedicated SOC, to bring the dedicated analysts, to do the whole flow of response, probably it will be delayed, I would say, in the best case, or cancelled altogether. But even if it's delayed for 2 or 3 years, it's a big problem because they stay exposed. So if we can do this integration into their operational center, it means that they can deploy it in a much easier way. So this is also something that we find that is very important. Besides all the smallest technical features, which are of course important, you need to be able to protect their operations, but you also need to make sure that it's easy for them to use it. If it's not easy to deploy it, not easy to integrate into their existing processes, then probably they will just skip the whole exercise. And this is just to sum up this very brief overview about what is OT and what is OT security. This is a typical deployment that we have done in multiple places. This is a renewable power plant. In this case, in the upper side, it's a solar power plant. A solar power plant is actually a big factory. It has hundreds of industrial control systems. It has thousands of sensors, thousands of industrial systems, so it is a big factory. And this factory needs to make sure it's also secure, because this factory is actually very vulnerable. It has, first of all, in many cases, it's unmanned, it's over a very big size. And the second thing is that by nature, it has connectivity to many operators. There is the owner of the solar plant, there is the integrator that is more focused on the inverters, there is the integrator which is more focused on the power control systems, and then there is the power utility, which is getting the power from this solar plant, also usually has access to this network. So it is a network that by nature is quite vulnerable, quite exposed, and it is quite complex. There are, again, hundreds and thousands of devices in this kind of network, and every change there in the operation can reduce the efficiency from 80% to 75%, already it's becoming non-profitable. So you need to make sure that it is operating in the right way, in the optimized way, and cybersecurity is part of this optimization. So for this, what we have done, we have deployed our monitoring system inside this power plant, monitoring all the inverters, all the hundreds of industrial systems, and making sure that there is no anomaly, no change. Because the good thing about industrial systems is that they are quite stable. You don't add an inverter into this system. One of the sensors that is usually communicating to another control system will not start all of a sudden to communicate to another sensor. These are changes that are not going to happen in this kind of network. So you can rely on this kind of stability in the operation in order to build a baseline of what is normal and what is abnormal, and then alert on this kind of changes. So this is on the threat detection system on the IDS side. And what is also important is to make sure that you are limiting and enforcing some policies for remote access. As mentioned, there are at least 4 or 5 different stakeholders that are getting continuous access to the site. And we see it all the time. Just last week, we saw another production floor where they were having access from Sweden from one of their integrators without any supervision. This integrator was just logging in when they had to do some monitoring, some maintenance, without any enforcement of any policies, any regulations, which is of course a big risk because somebody could take over this channel of communication. So we have installed also our firewall, our prevention system here in the middle, to make sure that every integrator, every external stakeholder is getting access only when it's supposed to do. Only at 10 a.m. on every Monday, the integrator from Germany is logging in to check some information and only reading data, not doing any changes. And if there is a change that it should come from Siemens, some new firmware, this is allowed on a specific time slot. The operator will say, only on the 1st of November, I am allowing Siemens to enter remotely and accessing on a very specific scenario. So these are the kind of things that you need to deploy in this kind of network. This is a typical type of deployment, and there are many solutions for different kind of applications. Smaller sites, bigger sites, there are a lot of things. I'll be glad to discuss it with if there is anyone that is interested in this area. It's a fascinating area. There are many things that you need to design in the right way. And these are things that we can discuss more in details. So this was an overview about cybersecurity and how it relates to OT network. And now we touch more about AI into cybersecurity, specifically for OT networks. And to start with that, first of all, I'll give you a bit of an overview. What is cybersecurity for OT networks? What we at least are doing in our systems, we are running 6 different agents, meaning that we are not just using one kind of an algorithm to detect potential attacks. We are running 6 algorithms in parallel, trying to detect different types of risks, also depending on where we are located in the network. The first thing that is the most basic one is the network topology. When you are looking on an industrial network, as I said in the beginning, it's quite stable. It should stay more or less the same all the time, unless you know that there is a technician that is supposed to come on site with its laptop and connect to the network, and this you can also know in advance exactly what he's going to do and the IP address and so on. Besides that, there isn't a reason to do a change. A sensor is not changing its IP address all of a sudden. A sensor is not starting to communicate with another sensor all of a sudden. The things are quite stable, so you can do the first mapping of what is the normal network topology, what is already existing in the network, and from that point on, any change in the network should raise an alert. If there is a new communication session from one device to the other, it should raise an alert. Already 5 minutes, time passes by. So this is network topology. Then there are the known vulnerabilities like we found now with the Schneider. We need to make sure that these are being protected. I'll go a bit faster because we are running out of time. Machine to machine is exactly what each device is supposed to talk to another device. Again, all the black areas here are things where, in our point of view, you don't really need to deploy AI for this. These are strict types of solutions. The other parts where you do need AI, but you need to do it in the right way, is the places where there is some behavioral type of operations, whether it's a technician that is deploying some maintenance, besides the strict policies of when he is supposed to enter the network, what he is doing in the network, you should monitor it in a more closer way where you can use AI. When there is a change of the firmware into the device, you know that it's going to happen, but if you can validate this firmware in terms of what is the impact of this change, is something that is going to give you some value. And the overall industrial process is also quite a complex process that you can use AI in order to model it and to change it, to track it for changes. So this is, we can skip it. What is AI trying to learn the behavior and bring some conclusions in an intelligent way and an automatic way? And also what is machine learning? How do we use machine learning? How do we use data and so on? Which is an important point that we will touch on soon. And as was discussed earlier today, the status of AI today is that it's not very predictable. You need to have a lot of training in order to get some results, and eventually you cannot really explain how you go to these results, which is the biggest problem, especially when you are talking about OT networks. People need very concrete examples. They need to understand what they need to do. So when we are looking on AI for OT security, we are looking on three things. First of all, where do you need to deploy it? What I showed before, where is the value for that? Second of all, how do you explain the results so somebody can take an action about it? And third of all, how do you train the system? How do you take data for that? So as I mentioned, for the OT part, the machine-to-machine part, what we find value, what we currently use the AI, is because there are many variants of devices, many old protocols. You can find hundreds of types of devices, hundreds of types of protocols. You need to train the solution every time on a different variant of a system. You can use AI for that to build this model. You can do it offline, you can do it online. That's the place where we currently find a lot of use for that. On the processes, we'll talk about it in the last slide. This is a big challenge. In order to model the processes, you need a lot of data. It's not existing currently. It's something that some companies have tried to do it, but every time they get to a new factory, they get to a different type of a model, and then the logic fails. So it's something that still requires some advancement. And then on the human side, the behavioral part is a place where you can get some benefits in terms of educating the system, what is the normal behavior of a technician, what the technician does, what is the timing, and so on, and then raise an alert when there is a deviation. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges in general for AI today is to explain the results. For some things, like was discussed in the morning, the categorization of photos and so on, it's less critical. For cybersecurity, especially in industrial systems, it's a key issue. Unless you can explain why you raised an alert, nobody is going to do anything with that. And this is the future of what is called XAI, explainable AI, is to make sure that you are building a model where you can explain what happened, why we raised an alert. This is a key issue in general in AI today. For cybersecurity and for OT security specifically, this is a key area. Unless we have this kind of explanation interface, we will not be able to deploy the more advanced types of AI. Another part which is very important, it was mentioned in the presentation of Professor Zehevi earlier today. Data is the new black gold, like he was calling it in his presentation, which is very important and very true also for industrial systems. The problem in industrial systems, unlike photos where everybody is uploading it to the internet, nobody is uploading their industrial processes to the internet. This is their own secret sauce. You will not get this information. Even if you are installed in a network, you are not allowed to take this information outside. So in order to train cybersecurity, you need to have data, and data is a big problem in terms of getting it in industrial systems. So what is the conclusion from our point of view about how to use AI in OT security? First of all, you can use it today to model the different variants. This is existing, this is being used by us and by others. We believe this is a very good use of current information. The second thing, the last point, you need to get to a point where you can explain the results of your AI on more complicated issues, the overall process and so on. But what is important for the short term is the part in the middle. You need to be able to gather data. And this is you can do by deploying your systems currently without running AI, but by gathering data from your deployments. So in 2 years, 3 years, you can really deploy AI, but you will have enough information that you can test your solutions and you can train your solutions and you can build the models to explain them. So this is our 3 steps in terms of AI for the OT security, and this is what we are currently deploying. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
We will have more questions later on in the panel discussion. Don't worry, don't worry. Thank you so much, Mr. Ilan Barda from Radiflowe. Mr. CEO, thank you very much. 好的，各位长官、各位贵宾，接下来是我们今天第2位主讲人，我们掌声欢迎趋势科技全球消费市场开发总监许玉成许总监，掌声欢迎。今天为我们分享的主题是创新科技崛起，台湾资安的新未来。This is Mr. Stephen Xu, Director of IoT Business Development from Trend Micro. 再次掌声欢迎 Stephen。
Hello. You can hear me all right? Okay, much better. Okay, today I'm going to use leverage this opportunity to present the Trend Micro, previous Trend Micro, and the present Trend Micro, and the future thing we're going to do. Okay. Before that, allow me to introduce who is Trend Micro. I believe a lot of people know Trend Micro is an antivirus company. Actually, we're doing more. Okay. This is a slogan we have, a war safe for exchange digital information. I try to emphasize the digital information because we see the big change especially in the OT world. We interpret as the digital transformation. Trend Micro established in the 1988 United States. Actually, our headquarters right now based in Japan. You can see the financial status. We are doing doing okay so far. Okay, and also we are focused on different industry, especially automobile, telecom, bank, oil. That's the we are heavily emphasized on those enterprise area. Okay. So in terms of business, okay, because we try to establish the global business. So we right now roughly we have around 55 global businesses worldwide, and we have 4 major R&D centers. In Taiwan is the biggest one, and we also have the R&D center in China, in US, also in Philippines. Okay. So what we do, I would say what we did. Okay. Actually, this year is the Trend Micro 30 years. So we can say through the these 3 decades, we see a lot of change. We also step in different technology domain. Year 1995, we are stepping the LAN server security. After that, we focus on gateway, etc., etc. Until 2016 is the big change for Trend Micro. We decide to extend our footprint in security, not just the antivirus. We think the network security also important. So we make a very important decision. We merge HP Tipping Point, and they join the Trend Micro and contribute a lot of the not just technology, also threat intelligence as well. Okay. So basically, in the IT area, we're still in the IT area in the previous stage. Actually, we can see a lot of change in the IT area, especially for the infrastructure. A lot of cloud, a lot of machine become moving into the cloud or become virtualized. So we see the difficulty about the DevOps operation, how to make sure the cloud security, also the virtualization, to make it more efficiency in terms of cybersecurity management. We also see the aspect about a network. Networks become very complex and also provide more attack surface. So we think the network part also important as well, especially in the IT environment. And most important thing is the end user. We call it consumerization. Why? Okay, think about it. Okay, in the corporate or enterprise, the IT people defend the cybersecurity for the corporate. They build a firewall, they deploy a lot of the cybersecurity solution. But consumers start buying the mobile device or their own device. It's become a headache for the IT people in terms of the balance, the cybersecurity and productivity. So they start to embrace. Maybe they should allow the consumer to do more. So we call it consumerization. They also bring a lot of difficulty in the cybersecurity management. So based on that, we think about our Trendminder solution should focus on hybrid cloud security, network defense, and user protection. So how we do that? Okay, especially recently, just like the previous speech just mentioned about the machine learning, I think that's very important. Also AI part. We think machine learning and AI will be the next step for the, especially in be the countermeasure for the cybersecurity. So we call it S-Gen security. So we start from technology-wise. We start from antivirus, anti-malware. We extend to the behavior analysis. And machine learning, if I remember correctly, in year 2008, we already used the machine learning to identify, to be able to recognize spam mail. So because at that time, that's label intensive, also the computer consuming as well. So we decided to use the machine learning, and the result is pretty good. So we try to extend this capability in our future technology roadmap. So machine learning also is important. Then we have sandbox, intrusion detection, application control, integrity monitoring, and also response containment. Okay, so all of those technologies still need to depend on what? We call the smart protection network. Actually, it's a very big database. We put it in the cloud. That database contains a lot of things, contains a lot of threat intelligence, including the file, mail, URL address, also mobile app, or whatever you name it. We have a lot of technology and product depend on this database. So we transform those solutions become the cybersecurity, especially for the hybrid cloud, network defense, and also user protection. So we cooperate with a partner, for example, Microsoft, Amazon. For the enterprise side, we have co-work with IBM, Splunk. For the end user protection, we also co-work with the Microsoft and Apple and the, Google as well. Okay, that's in the IT area. I'm going to skip this one. We always put this slide in this chart. We're talking about market leadership. Okay, but most important thing, what do we see now? You know, as the cybersecurity company, the most fear we have is we're not able to predict or we're not able to respond to the customer demand if they encounter the cybersecurity. So what do we see now? So from the atmosphere condition, we identify three things. We call it IUT. It's not IoT, it's IUT. We find out the shift of IT infrastructure, user behavior change, also emerges new threat. We'll talk about the threat first, okay. From the threat landscape, you can see that from year 2000, the worm, then after that is spam, spyware, botnet, web threat, target attack, mobile attack, and ransomware. It's causing a lot of damage now, okay. So you can see the threats changing, and based on our database, and we identify every day, I'm telling you, it's every day, we identify 5,000 unique malware or malicious file every day. So in year 2016, we see the spyware, the dimensional ransomware is a huge spike. The huge spike is reached to the 750 to 100%. We see one reason the ransomware business take off. I would say the business take off. One reason the Bitcoin, because of the that's the payment is not an issue, so the hacker can move their target to create more ransomware. So also for the IoT device, in 2016 is a wake-up call for the Mirai DDoS attack. We also see the potential threat based on this kind of Mirai attack. Later I'll also show you. Okay, that's threat. How about the infrastructure? We see the infrastructure change a lot from physical to the virtual, then cloud, container, and serverless. You can see the dramatic change in the IT environment. Okay, they move everything to the cloud. Now there's no virtual machine anymore. You can run your code in the cloud, and you don't know where is it. Okay. So what next? Okay, even more point to protect. We identify for iPod, more server or more infrastructure will move to the cloud, even our OT environment. We start to see that something happening. Also, IoT, 5G network is going to the big phenomenon to drive the IoT, AIoT, or IIoT area. And user behavior, okay, mobile device, a smartphone device is a very, very clever device because a lot of users already, adopt the mobile phone as the user experience, also user interface. Also, that brings up something we call the privacy concern, especially GDPR this year in Europe become a very big topic. We also see in California, they start to adopt small set of the GDPR. So data privacy become a big issue as well. About threat, we think the ransomware will continue. Also the cyber propaganda. When I say that cyber propaganda is something like that, people try to leverage social media, try to leverage internet to abuse it to reach their goal. For example, there's our election happened this year. We identified there's 55 major elections in this year, also including Taiwan. So this kind of hate or how do you manipulate those social media? It's going to be a big issue as well. And we believe that AI and machine learning could be one of the technology to resolve that. And IoT hijacking, we still think is the big issue because one reason is the IoT device, we're not able to find who is the right ownership for the cybersecurity to control or manage the IoT device. Okay, so that's something we see. Okay, another thing we think about the threat landscape change is about the thing. We call it thing change. In the IT world, actually, we only care about the SMB enterprise, the server, desktop. So if there's a malware, normally calls the device itself or environment. We call the small bomb over there. But since IoT will come in, we see the more devices connected to internet, the impact is going to be huge, including industry, critical infra, city, government, or country. So the impact is going to be big. So the thing is changed. How about world? We see this one. Okay, take the factory as an example. It used to be the isolation environment. Okay, because isolation, you can see a lot of paper research talking about StarNet. Using they leverage the USB, do the internal propagation, and cause the damage. But start from 2014. 2014, you can see a lot of attack actually come through the IT environment and penetrate the OT environment. I think one reason 2014 is because in Germany, Industrial 4.0 finalized in the end of the 2013. So we can see a lot of attack actually leverage IT hacking technology and cause the OT environment damage. So we call the IT and OT combination attack. Before that, I would prefer to call the OT attack is the target attack. It actually is difficult to replicate, difficult to analyze. But we can see more attack actually come from the IT environment using the phishing mail or using the different kind of APT technology. Okay, so using the IT hacking skill, penetration, then do the propagation. We call the later movement in the environment, then disruption. That really require the OT domain technology or not, how to stop the machine, how to interpret the SCADA command, etc., etc. Okay, so talk about the threat, especially in last year and this year. Okay, I'll put these two examples here. When we talk about IoT threat, normally we consider two things very important. One is environment. The second one is explosive device. The environment-wise, you can see the WannaCry pair is one of example last year. And also device side, MIRAI and VPN filter, especially VPN filter, we kind of worry about this kind of malware, okay? So talk about the WannaCry payout. Actually, the people or hacker create a WannaCry payout is not target the OT environment. How come the OT environment suffers such impact? You can explain that. So the interconnection is happening, okay? The IT and the OT, in certain way, they already connect. Maybe using the USB or using a file server or the physical line of just connected. So in year 2017, you can see a lot of OT environment, production line, HI machine, gas station, railway, they all impact under the WannaCry, okay? So even this year, earlier this year, Boeing, they also the factory under the ransomware attack. Not mentioned about TSMC just recent months. A couple of weeks ago, there's the news, okay? That's the huge impact. So it's still, the WannaCry is still out there, still spreading, still causes a lot of impact, okay? How about device? When I mentioned about device, especially the research paper identified there's more than 500,000 consumer router. When I say the consumer router, usually just the small damage, but VPN filter is totally different. Actually, the way they hack into the router, they're using the default username, password, dictionary attack. The attack scenario is very similar like a MIRAI. After they go inside, they try to establish the botnet server with the botnet server together. How they do it? Actually, they try to connect to the one server actually provide the picture file or photo file. So the IP address is hiding in the ESIF metadata. So they try to establish the botnet environment. The second thing, they're going to install the plugin. The plugin, there's two plugins already identified. One is called a Pocket Sniffer. The other one is called a Tor network. It's probably easy to understand is that there's something they try to steal information and using the Tor network send it out. Because Tor network is not able to detect by IPS because it is encrypted, okay? But the packet sniffer, what they install the packet sniffer plugin in there, the specific try to sniff the packet in the OT environment. They sniff for the mobile protocol. They try to steal the credential. So you can see that some people or some group actually try to implant the VPN filter malware into the consumer router, but targeting the OT environment. Why? When I visited a lot of the OT or factory, I find out a lot of things. Their people or their engineer actually purchase the router from the consumer grade router, because when they try to do the POC or when they try to do the IoT project, sometimes they did not select the device very carefully because of the lack of the cybersecurity experience or skill set. So we see that something happening is the underground people or hacker, they're still thinking, they start to think the OT environment will be the treasure horse, will be the target in the future they can looking for. Okay, so what I'm saying, the digital transformation, because in Trend Micro, when we see the IoT, those kind of the terminology, actually the reason why people doing that is all related to the digital transformation. Why they do the digital transformation? The first thing is about competition. The reason, I mean, competition have a good way and a bad way. Okay, let's talk about a bad way. Okay, for the corporate competition or country competition, sometimes they will do the merge, stealing, poach, or tariff. You see the news between China and the US, they still haven't settled down. So in order to compete or survive in the market, you do the digital transformation. And why you need to do that? Because you pursue the new business model. You want to make your product disruptive. You want to win the war, also to agile your supply chain, to efficient your operation. That's the good thing, okay? So when you do the digital transformation, normally you will adopt the technology. You will embrace the internet. So what's the result you're going to see, okay? The impact for industry, you will identify six major impacts in the industry if you want to conduct the digital transformation. We call it product, service, manufacturer, supply chain, infrastructure, and management. Okay. Talk about product. If you want to be more competitive, okay, the product in sales need to have the connectivity, need to be intelligent and interactive. Also, you need to create a scenario, storyboard, how this product works, why is this product attractive. And from product, you want to get the service. Okay, the service, you need to provide this service, attractive, and also sharing service. Also, you want your service be able to do the subscription model. And that's going to impact the manufacturer. Why? Because the manufacturer process need to change it, need to do some modification, be able to fit in the product and service requirement. We see a lot of manufacturers, actually, they're doing that. They're also asking for help. Okay, if they open the internet, how they can validate the functionality. Also need the security as well. And the supply chain also important because you never sure your supply company is reliable or they are sufficient enough to handle the cybersecurity. So we call it procurement, assessment, auditing, also business continuity partner. How do we measure that? Infrastructure also is bringing a lot of topic. A lot of manufacturers or a lot of companies, they are thinking about cloud, 4G, 5G, OTA, that's the over-the-air update, also application. I think a lot of hardware companies in Taiwan, they are recruiting a lot of cloud engineer and application engineer. They try to build it, not just product, also service. They want to provide to their customer. In terms of the management, that's the big issue. Okay, what? We call the visibility, ownership, risk, and the instant response. We see that the big headed about the visibility is from the management point of view. You don't know where your IoT device is, how many machines you need to manage. And how about ownership? Okay, we talk about IT, OT, the cybersecurity ownership. It's not clearly defined yet. Also depend on different companies, have a different policy. The risk, how can you identify there is risk? Without visibility, there's nothing you can talk about risk. So after the incident, how are you going to respond it? How do you handle or recover your damage or the current situation? That we see the digital transformation impact in the industry. Okay, so that brings out the cybersecurity. So nothing different from the IT penetration or the IT vulnerability. It's going to suffer in the OT environment sooner or later if they open it. So they are looking for best practice or the countermeasure. That's something we heard from a lot of manufacturer or a lot of the customer. Okay, so give me one survey report. Actually, last year, I remember it's the Honeywell. They conducted a survey to the 1,000 company. That's those 1,000 company, including the electronic company, semiconductor. They're doing a lot of the manufacturing thing. Okay, they identified it more than around 40% of companies already conduct a digital transformation project, and 24% of companies they are going to do the digital transformation project this year. But what is the major drawback or rollback for them to do the digital transformation? The first one, of course, is money, right? Then finally, business case and how understand the technology. The fourth one, cybersecurity. Okay, they're concerned about it. And the survey result and the summary is also pretty shocking. Okay, more than 0.5% or 53% of companies respond that they are encounter the cybersecurity breach before, and 45% of companies they still not able to identify who is the best ownership to handle the cybersecurity in their environment or when they do it in the digital transformation. 37% company they do have some activity doing the special behavior, either using a network or using the host-based technology. Unfortunately, they still have 20% of company. They did not conduct any regular risk assessment at all. Okay, so that's for the digital transformation. How about Trend Micro? Okay, when we see the customer demand, also we see the environment change, we also need to change our solution. we understand the IT security is not 100% be able to deploy in the OT environment. So we also create a lot of solutions for the OT environment as well. So how do we respond those 6 major impacts in the digital transformation? So we transform it like this. For a product, we think we should have a system potential for in the product side. Supply chain need to have a cyber secure requirement. Manufacturer, you should have factory security protection. No matter it's inline more, passing more, or monitor more to the for the manufacturer. And the service-wise, we also think the security monitoring is very important. For infrastructure, how do you make sure the infrastructure is secure? Of course, there is infra security protection. And management, we think the SOC is the goal, or SING, the Security Operations Center. Okay. So how about Trend Micro, what we should do? I mean, that's a lot of debate in our Trend Micro inside as well, because when you try to change your IT security to fit in the OT environment, definitely something need to change. So we think we can provide solution in 3 areas, in the product side, manufacturer side, and also infrastructure side, okay. How about supply chain and service? Well, we do have the subject matter expert. We already conduct this kind of service for selected customer. Several customers in Taiwan, Japan, and China, also in US. We have expertise start to do the some kind of security guideline requirements specific for that's the industry or vertical. And for the solution, so we make a decision for Trend Micro solution. We need to SOC enable, which means all the solution provided from Trend Micro, we need to support SOC. We are not going to do the SOC. We will support the SOC. So if you have a SING platform or SOC platform, we will try to support it because we still define Trend Micro as a solution provider, not the service provider. Okay, that's something in our long-term roadmap we're going to do. So in terms of the layer protection, okay, that's the generic solution for IoT part. IoT, you have a sensor, you have endpoint, go through the gateway or some kind of hub through the service provider, go to internet and cloud. So we have the device security. That's SDK for the device. Okay, no matter it's the edge device or a gateway device, we already provide SDK for a lot of device manufacturers to integrate inside of their product. Okay. So service provider, we co-work with telecom. We have an NFV-based network security. It's a network function virtualization. We already co-work with the several major telecom, also including Taiwan, Japan. And the cloud security, we done it for several years. We continue to involve our cloud security. We also provide the security for container as well. They're all based on our connected intelligence. Okay, we understand the OT environment. Sometimes they are isolated. So we also have white listing technology, or for solution for the passing more. We call the we were mirror traffic into our device to do the analyze. Okay. So for more information about our solution, you go to this website. I think most important because I personally would think that Trend Micro is a Taiwan-based company because in Taiwan we have very strong R&D center in Taiwan, so we cooperate with the Taiwan device maker very close, especially our co-founder, all Taiwanese. So we think about the opportunity for Taiwan. What should we do, or what else we can contribute? We can see a lot of device maker or hardware manufacturer in Taiwan. They are suffering in 2 things: quantity and low margin. Because when we pursue the quantity, that means you also sacrifice your quality in some way. So quality, okay, industrial cluster is no longer an advantage in Taiwan. In Taichung, we are very proud because we have very sophisticated supply chain environment and the cluster over there. But war is change, okay? War is flat. So supply chain also will change as well. So you no longer depend on this kind of advantage anymore. Also tariff war, okay? Industry 4.0, US first. You see a lot of some big company moved to US, Also, there's the war between China and the US. Also, Taiwan will be suffer as well. How can we overcome it? So that's one thing. We should pursue the quality product. Okay. If you see the news or saw the news, a lot of device makers in Taiwan actually suffering, like D-Link and ASUS, the FTC, US FTC, they have the big fine because they did not do the cybersecurity in their router or device. So we see the cybersecurity and data privacy becomes a major or default requirement for your product. So onboard security, we think should be the default. So we are willing to provide the SDK to go work with the Taiwan hardware manufacturer. Those SDK actually can protect the device, make sure the device is already reached the certain quality of the cybersecurity. How about low margin? I think traditional thinking about the BOM cost, bill of material, it's always happen. Okay, when they say about how much is router, they also consider hardware cost. This one is not going to work in the IoT world. Okay. Also, selling goods or service. I think service will be the long-term revenue stream we should pursue. And also, insufficient core technology, we are suffering. Okay. So we should transfer the low margin become the high margin. How we do that? High quality secure product is one thing. That's one way to compete with China, or one way to compete the low price product. Okay. And new business model. Okay. We think of subscription. We try to persuade our hardware manufacturers we should do that because what? One reason software company or security company can be so sustained, we can sustain for 30 years. Because our business model is pursued for subscription based. It's not royalty based. It's because the cybersecurity requires continually investment. So if we can transform or cooperate with a hardware company, pursue this kind of business model, I think that's a big change for the Taiwan manufacturer or Taiwan company. Okay. So far, that's the finding, and we are going to do actually the transformation happening from 2 years ago. So Trend Micro is very, very happy to go with the manufacturer or the device maker in Taiwan. Okay. So for any question or information you require me to have a more further discussion. Okay. Oh, okay. So I'm going to finish my presentation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen Xu, Director of IoT Business Development from Trend Micro. Trend Micro stands between you and the virus. Very important. Thank you, Mr. Stephen Xu. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our third keynote speaker. Please join me. He's ready already. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tal Steinherz from WeNspire. He's the Chief Technology Officer. Please welcome with our applause. Good afternoon, sir. So we'll be talking about national and personal Israeli cyber innovation.
So good afternoon, everybody. As it was presented, my name is Tal Steinherz. That's the first time in a presentation that I don't feel ridiculous to repeat my name because I'm a little bit of surprise for some of you, a little bit of last minute. So as you can see, the presentation is not about IoT. But I hope that at the end of the presentation, you will feel it was worth it and not less interesting than IoT. So I'm going to share with you what I call the national and personal Israeli cyber innovation. It means that I'm now CTO of a new established company, a startup company dealing with cybersecurity, a disruptive data protection solution. But before I got into this position, until the end of 2017, I was a government employee. And in my last position, I was the CTO of the Israel National Cyber Bureau, now known as the Israel National Cyber Directorate. As part of my duty, I had two main responsibilities.
On the one hand, I was like the chief scientist of cyber for the government, meaning that I was in charge of promoting and supporting the Israeli cybersecurity ecosystem. And I would like to share my experience with you, talking a little bit about things that were mentioned earlier this morning about general, how to promote innovation. And I would focus on the cybersecurity impact. And on the other hand, I had the chance to actually meet and get an encounter with many of the Israeli cybersecurity companies. And once again, it's a great opportunity to share a lot of this experience. So I would try to actually persuade you that when it comes to cybersecurity, innovation is very important. So the first part of my presentation, I will talk about why do we need innovation when we are dealing with cybersecurity, and why does innovation comes together with cybersecurity. Then I will go and explain why Israel, as a leading cyber innovative globally. And then what's the outcome of the Israeli cybersecurity, some figures and a short summary of the Israeli cybersecurity ecosystem, and moving to my own story and tell you a little bit about the innovation that we are making in WeNspire. By the way, forgot to mention, as you can see, I'm using some double meanings. So WeNspire, Israel, and the company, and our company is called WeNspire. So why does cyber drive innovation? Cyber is a great challenge, okay? Technology controls everything, and we want to let technology controls everything. And this morning, I was very happy to hear my colleague Shmuley saying that in a few years, we are not going to have tests in the educational systems. So I have a 12-year-old daughter. Although she is top in her school, she is still very much afraid of tests. She hates tests. And I was very happy that now I can tell her that I heard that because of new AI technologies, she wouldn't have to take tests in a few years, hopefully before she graduates. Nevertheless, I told Shmuley that everything about this AI revolution is not going to work if we don't have the right cybersecurity measures, right? So if my smartphone, my laptop, whatever, is going to test me instead of a test that you sit in a class and someone watches that you are taking the test, then it's not going to work. And this is a very small example of what we are talking today. So why does it a great challenge? Because we want technology to control all. We want to be always on. We want to be always connected. And we become more and more vulnerable. So at the Bureau, where we try to figure out when did actually this whole cyber era evolved? Because there was a feeling that one day we all woke up and everybody was talking cyber, cyber, cyber. Okay, so what happened? And we realized that when the smartphones, the internet, the computational power, when they all merged together, it was actually the singular point. Then we realized that we live in a different world and we are so vulnerable. Now, as I mentioned, I gave you the example of the educational system, but the exposure is for everyone. All industries, all sectors. It could be a home user, it could be an enterprise, it could be a government entity. You can see here, we were talking earlier about energy and IoT, but you see even real estate, healthcare, of course, financial sector, telecommunication, they are all under threat. And the reason that we need to be very much innovative is because we are facing the most innovative bad guys. Okay, so in cyber, and when we look about the attackers, we see a lot of innovation. And the only way that we can beat this innovation is if we are going to be not less innovative. And I'll give you some example. Targeting OT systems, Stuxnet was mentioned in the previous presentation. Stuxnet was something that was very innovative in a way that someone realized. So we have been actually looking to steal information for many years from computers, okay, since the 1980s, even before. But that was something innovative. It was the first time that someone proved, and obviously after a lot of thinking, that one can actually attack the physical world with a cyber attack. The second example of the innovative that we see in the attackers was in the ransomware phenomena. So I will share with you from my experience that when I joined the Bureau, it was 6 years ago, I kind of realized that many attacks that we see in the physical world now have a replica in the cyber world. And I was thinking, back then ransomware was not a known attack yet. So I was just thinking for myself, how are they going to make the ransomware in the cyber domain? And not long after that, hopefully I wasn't the one that initiated it, there came the ransomware. A very sophisticated, very innovative kind of thinking on how to make easy money with, to tell you the truth, a very simple, even primitive kind of an attack. But what about the next trend that we see? Did you imagine that your refrigerator is going to be accused of launching attacks? That sounds like science fiction, but it happens. This is another innovative way of thinking. So you see the attackers, they think out of the box. They see the IoT trend. They see that many IoT devices are on the one hand connected to the most sensitive infrastructure, either to your home appliances or to your manufacturing devices. And on the other hand, they are a little bit of a few ways back in their technology, in their power, so they are not well protected. And there you see a great way to infiltrate their networks. But there is also innovation about thinking conceptually. Okay, and this is very important. Innovative is not only about technology. Innovation is also about the concept, about policy, and we'll mention when we get to the national efforts that we were running at the Bureau. And I would like to emphasize that going after the supply chain. And here is one of the most prominent examples of this happening. A few years back, probably a state-sponsored organization, I will let you guess who, managed to steal documentation about the F-35 aircraft from Lockheed Martin, the US company. Lockheed Martin was probably one of the most secure companies in the world. Okay, they are contractor of the DoD. They have the most sensitive classified technologies. How did those attackers manage to penetrate this protected and secured network? And may I remind you that Lockheed Martin itself was back then a very important and significant cybersecurity provider for the whole American administration. I will tell you how they did it. The adversaries attacked the RSA company. RSA company was the one that provided Lockheed Martin with some of its most sensitive cybersecurity measures. Okay, they provided them with encryption tools. In RSA, those attackers managed to find the keys to the encryption systems that were situated in Lockheed Martin. And then entering Lockheed Martin became something that all of us could have done. This is a very high-end kind of a supply chain attack. But one of the most known attacks in last years in the commercial sector was on Target, the American retailer. And in Target, it was also an attack that came through the supply chain. And for those of you who actually listened to the Trend Micro presentation, it is very clear why. Because now, if you want to make your business more efficient, if you want to make it more valuable, you must open yourself to your suppliers and the supply chain. And in Target, actually, the attack came from the air condition technician, because the air condition system was connected to the networks of Target, and from there they actually managed to steal a huge amount of credit cards. So going after the supply chain is a great example of how innovative the bad guys were facing. And obviously social engineering that gets innovative and innovative all the time, okay? Whenever we think that we've seen the most innovative, creative kind of scenario, kind of phishing email, or spear phishing, whatever, then we see another example, and it's getting better and better from their point of view. And all of that to give you an impression how innovative the attackers we're facing are, and why do we need to be innovative. If you look about the numbers, and I would tell you, I didn't realize those numbers when I was at the bureau. It was just when I became an entrepreneur and I needed some figures for my slides, I ran into this amazing, I can't call it another way, of differences between how much we invest or we spend on cybersecurity and how much do we suffer, or what's the damages that cybersecurity attacks cause our organizations and our countries. It's 30 times more. 30 times more. So we would reach, hopefully by 2020, almost $200 billion of market cap for the cybersecurity measures. But the damages are expected to be $6 trillion. How are we going to bridge the gap between the two? Only if we're going to be innovative and if we are going to install more and more innovative technologies in our cyber products. And once again, cybersecurity is not only for cybersecurity companies, and it's not only for protecting your own infrastructure. I believe that every company now has a business line that they would benefit a lot from embedding some cybersecurity measures in their products. And to finish this part of the presentation, I just want to make sure that you all know that every record that is stolen worth, now it's $154. In healthcare, it's close to $400, every piece of record. And it's also a very similar amount of how much the bad guys want to pay for those who manage to steal these kind of records. And once again, because of the innovative attacks, when you are under attack, an adversary manages usually to stay on an average of almost 200 days in your network because it's been detected. And remember that because this is very important for our company's approach. Okay, so we realized that cyber is a great deal. We realized that we need to be innovative, and why do we talk about cybersecurity in Innotech? But now, how come Israel became such a leading power in cybersecurity? And a little bit of things that I will focus on what was discussed in this morning. So a bit of proportion. If we took the map of Israel, put it on the map of the US, the one we see as some kind of another or the first superpower in cyber, the one that we are trying to compete, I would say, that would be the differences, okay? Because the US is almost 500 times larger than Israel. So the first answer why Israel became such a cybersecurity leader is because it's a matter of necessity. We don't have a choice. As I told you, we've seen in the criminal world that all the attacks move from the physical to the cyber. It's going to happen, it happens actually over time also in national security. Okay, so Israel is located in not the most pleasant neighborhood, and we have to deal with cybersecurity as a measure of national security. That was the threat, but it was an opportunity, okay, because Israel has strong foundations. And I will not repeat all of that was said in the morning, but I will emphasize a few points. In cyber, the fact that we have a compulsory military service and the security forces were the first to enter the cyber domain means that we have a privilege no other country has. And believe me, I had talks with some US senators that were actually envy of us. We have the privilege to take the most brilliant 18-year-old boys and girls, gather them together for a few years in our technological units, okay, provide them the best cyber education, and then letting them run by themselves for a few years on the most crucial national level security problems. Now imagine what kind of experience, what kind of mindset, what it does for these young people. So after a few years, when they leave the army, they become what we know as the innovative, the ones that think out of the box, the most creative kind of people. Okay? The culture issue, for some reason it became so popular in Israel, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's a problem. We don't take things for granted, okay? We argue all the times, once again, in more tradition kind of industry, this is why we are not such an industrial country, but when it comes to being innovative, that's a great advantage. Another thing in between is the fact, and this is something that I think that Taiwan also shares with Israel, sometimes it's a blessing for being a small country. We are small, we are dense, we are networked. In Israel, they say that everyone knows each other. Okay, I know you from that, I know you from here, okay. If I don't know you, then there is someone that can connect us. And it's great for creating teams, for making entrepreneurships. And the last thing is the ecosystem. So cybersecurity is like the next level of Israel being the startup nation, of Israel having this very flourishing high-tech scene. So we have a strong academia, not in cyber specifically, but in computer science and engineering. We have this high-tech industry, and we also have the human capital, and the government that managed to put itself in a position that they are supporting and they are making some kind of a partnership. And why is that? And I think this is one of the message for Taiwanese government. The Israeli government took leadership position when it came to cybersecurity. And I will give you that with a little bit history and how it evolved. Israel was the first country more than 15 years ago to realize that critical infrastructures are threatened by cyber attacks. In 2002, most of the countries in the world didn't even know what cyber was back then. We established a special entity to monitor and regulate our critical infrastructures. For a decade, that was the situation. Then, around 2010, our Prime Minister realized and had the vision that cybersecurity is not another trend, and it's not something that is going to vanish in the near future, but it's a real threat to civilization. So he called upon a committee of experts from all sectors, and after 1 year, they recommended that there will be a new government entity, which is back then was the National Cyber Bureau, that would oversee, synchronize, and run government efforts in cyber with two missions. And it's a very unique approach. On the one hand, protecting the civilian sector and the federal entities. And on the one hand, so it's a very ambitious challenge, how to protect a country. And on the other hand, promote Israel as a leading cybersecurity ecosystem to take this global threat as a great opportunity and an engine for growth. And what you can see is that it has great influence on the ecosystem and on the innovation that went on. Because on the one hand, it creates demands. Okay, so some of the government efforts and the government resolutions created demand for new technologies, for new innovation ideas. On the other hand, the government spent significant budgets on promoting academic research. I mentioned a minute ago that we were not in the top position in the academic research in cybersecurity. So we put around $75 million over several years together with the universities in establishing academic research centers to deal with cybersecurity and to collaborate with the industry and with universities around the world. And I repeat the call of Professor Zevi from the morning that having people from Taiwan coming over for a significant period of time to Israeli universities to work on their PhD thesis or as postdocs could be a win-win situation for both. We invested together with the Innovation Authority and with the Minister of Economy in programs that help cybersecurity startups emerge and make their impact. And we also gave example. Okay, the Israeli government imposed on itself, for example, a benchmark of allocating 8% of its budget to cybersecurity. So to summarize Israel leadership, as I said, we have the connectivity, we have the skilled HR, the academia, the industry, and we manage actually to create this great public-private partnership. Okay, government, private sector, academia, all together working together, see them each other as partners. You know, usually governments are treated like the big brother. At the beginning of the Bureau, we heard in conferences, if we asked the question, what can we do for you? The answer was, just stay out. Okay? But after a few years on the road, we showed that we have value, that not only that we don't interfere, but we also become very popular, and it was changed. And as was mentioned also in this conference, Israel, like Taiwan, is very export-oriented. If we try to summarize the numbers, so the Israeli cybersecurity story began in the early 1990s, even in the late 1980s. This was the logo for the first antivirus in the world. Okay, speaking about innovation, was invented in Israel. You see the black and white, how old it is. Checkpoint, the largest, most significant Israeli cybersecurity company, is one of the largest cybersecurity-only company in the world. Oops, sorry. Then we see continuous growth unto a situation that now we have in Israel 300, even more, cybersecurity companies. Most of them are startup companies. And just to give you an impression, because startup companies are usually considered the innovation part, in 2014, the number of cybersecurity startup companies in Israel was more than the number of cybersecurity startup companies in the whole world except the US. And sorry. And another thing that I'm very proud of regarding innovation is that in 2016, 40% of Gartner's cool vendors were Israeli companies. In addition, you can see that annual revenues put Israel in 5% of global market, which is 50 times more than our size of the world population. A lot of funds being raised in 2017. That's 3 times the amount of our global market share. And it's a great beneficial business for those who invested because of M&As, etc. And the last part of this national story is the fact that you can see that many multinational companies, and I think that Trend Micro, for example, should be another one, actually came to Israel and established cybersecurity R&D centers in Israel because they want to harness our talent, they want to harness the experience that we have, and from an Israeli point of view, the fact that we have in the ecosystem also global companies, multinational companies, and we see people moving from startup companies to multinational companies, government, etc. It's a great thing to sustainable growth. Now we'll move to our story, to WeNspire. So WeNspire wants to end the cat and mouse game in cybersecurity. The company was founded together with me. I have 2 co-founders. One of them was on my team at the bureau. And we shared the same experience that when we had, like the government CISO, a requirement to protect a large data repository that the Israeli government was about to establish, we found ourselves in a way that we had the largest budget, we had access to all this wonderful ecosystem that I've described, and yet the only thing we could come up with was a multi-layer solution, so to install this one and this one and this one and this one, but nothing that provided us the certainty we were looking for, that we would know that we are really protected. And the reason is because of this endless cat and mouse chase. And you see as a fact that despite all this great solutions and cybersecurity market, we continuously see more and more major data breaches. And I mentioned Target earlier. In Target, the CEO lost his job because of this major data breach. So it's a matter that is a great concern for the C-level executives. And we've seen the American administration losing almost 6 million records of employees with the most sensitive information. And this is the American administration, so it's not another kind of company. And Equifax and Deloitte, the latest, that also lost significant portion of their data were under cyber attacks. So what is to be done, and why is that? The reason that all of this is happening is because currently, I think we haven't been innovative enough yet, and we have been trying to detect the attacker all the time. And if you are always trying to detect, then it means that you actually continue the cat and mouse game, because then you only react to the new threat, but you always be vulnerable to something that you still don't know. And this keeps the natural advantage of the attacker all the time. And as I mentioned, if you look at it from an organization point of view, you are still left in continuous uncertainty. Nothing is guaranteed currently in cyber. If we look once again how it reflects in how innovative we were over the time, it means that first we dealt only with the known attacks. So the antiviruses, the firewalls, etc., they were all signature based. This is not innovative. The second phase was already something that we could call advanced and innovative. They were trying to deal with unknown attacks, and I could call them in general anomaly detection. Okay, so you're trying to see some kind of anomaly in the communication, in the behavior or something, and then try to detect. And the third, and this is where I think we should go, and this is where we are going, you want to deal with the real unknown, and what I call, you want to be threat agnostic. You want to be in a position that you can say that you are not dealing with something that you know the technique, not the signature, but the technique. You want to do something that no matter where the attacker would come from, you'd still be able to give the organization some kind of a protection. So I'm not going to talk a lot about our solution, but in general, we call it the data protection dome. And what we do is that we develop the technology that can continuously validate the amount of pure information that streams out from the system. And I emphasize the fact pure information, because there is a lot of garbage coming out of your system, a lot of metadata, a lot of bytes that are part of the communication, and so on and so forth. We have the technology to extract and understand what is information in this huge pipe of communication based on some data analytics and scientific models that we came from. And you can call it like the data DNA calculator and understand. And how does it work? You take any kind of a system in a 2-3-tier architecture. So the server that runs the application, the storage. You install our network filter at on the outgoing communication channel. And then you get the protection of the dome. Because the innovative idea that we're talking about is contain the attack and not try to detect it. And I will finish with a quote that it wasn't our quote, but I think that it's very reasonable. So for any one of you who believe and understand that because of the innovation of the attackers, your organization is going to be breached, they will be able to penetrate. So let's try and sustain something deterministic that we can validate that they are not able to create the damage, they are not able to exfiltrate the data that they're trying to steal. For those of you familiar with the story about the fox who got into the vineyard because there was a hole in the fence, if he ate too many grapes, he wasn't able to come out. So this is what we are trying to bring, once again, an innovative idea, a new approach, and making sure that no one can steal a significant portion of your data from your system. And this is, once again, the quote that summarizes our approach. With so many number of high-profile hacks growing, and cybersecurity experts are thinking that maybe a new and creative way should be used to stop it. And one example, don't stop it at all. Try to contain it. Thank you very much. I'll appreciate if someone's going to tell me if thank you in your language. Actually, Peter, there is?
Danke. It's
okay, so
of danke.
It means that I had a great presentation. Any questions?
There will be lots of questions in the panel discussion, I assure you. So thank you once again to our CTO of WeNspire, Mr. Tal Steinherz. My God, I having just listened to your presentation, it feels like an episode of Mission Impossible. So cyber attack is extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. 好的，那么我们自2017年以前呢，就已经发生了许多全球重大一个资安事件，包含了许多知名的网站遭到骇客入侵，用户的资料大量的外泄，就如同我们 Mr. Steinherz 刚才所讲的。而且呢，恶意软体，就比如说 WannaCry 也曾经出现了，勒索的病毒呢，除了电脑之外，也开始入侵到我们自己现在用的行动装置，不管是 iPhone、iPad 等等。好的，那么面对于这样子日新月异的网络攻击，而且是永远存在的网络攻击，我们应该如何做好一个更快、更棒的抉择，来减低我们的损害呢？接下来我们要进入我们的综合讨论。好的 ，So ladies and gentlemen, questions are coming up right now. So shall we welcome our speakers on stage? Please, Mr. Ilan Barda, CEO of Radiflowe. Please welcome once again Mr. Tal Steinherz, CTO of WeNspire, and from Trend Micro, Director of IoT Business Development, Mr. Stephen Xu. And joining us right now this afternoon, we have Mr. Sebastian Kamyshenko, okay, from the Force Shield Incorporated, VP Engineering and Product Delivery. 再来，我们要欢迎我们今天的主持人，掌声欢迎我们数位时代我们总主笔王志仁王先生，掌声欢迎 Mr. John Wong, Chief Editor-in-Chief of Business Next Media. So,
thank you. Welcome. Okay. The topic of our panel discussion coming up is exploring the challenges and opportunities in the data era. I think we have this topic for two reasons. One is that Taiwan is strong in hardware, but relatively weak in software, which is what Israel is very good at, especially in the security area. And second is that everything is becoming digital. I mean, we're entering the digital age. Even physical object, say, be it like a running machine or a living human body, that as long as it constantly, the sending messages can be captured, transmitted, and stored in data format. Okay, so actually, data is not just a raw material or a tool; it's considered an asset. So that's the reason why it needs to be protected. Before we start the questions, I'd like to give each of our panelists some time to introduce your company and what it does. Okay, then we start the question. So start from Sebastian. Okay.
Yeah. Hello. Well, great to be here. I'm really happy. So Force Shield is a Taiwan-based company. We are focusing on, in general, on security, in particular on IoT security. We are, in particular, again, it's not limited to that, but we are focusing on blocking automated attacks based on lots of researches and reports. In some cases, up to 90% of the traffic is malicious traffic or or automated traffic. And we are helping our customers to block those attacks, detect and block those attacks.
Thank you. Then Stephen.
Hello, Trend Micro, I believe a lot of people know Trend Micro or what Trend Micro did. Okay, actually, we try to extend our solution or service into different area, especially within the IT world. I'm not trying to say it's exaggerate because there's still a lot huge opportunity, but we see the bigger impact also happen in the smart city, smart manufacturer, also connected car. So a lot of, I would say, not trying to say opportunity, we see a lot of threat is going to happen. That's also cause a lot of damage in the future. So as our CEO also mentioned that we have a duty to protect the digital world. I mean, that's her mission, I mean, for whole life. This year, especially for Trend Micro, 30 years, we're going to extend another 30 years in the cybersecurity area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then Tal.
Well, as I just presented, WeNspire, a very early stage company, but we are going to protect any kind of data repository and kind of system based on data. Also, you can imagine, so it's both on-prem or in the cloud, or also communication channels that you want to validate that are not actually used to exfiltrate data from your system if you're connected to one of the third parties supply chain that I mentioned earlier, or in any kind of scenario that you're interested in.
Okay, then Ilan.
Hi there. So Radiflowe is providing cybersecurity for industrial control systems, everything which is related to the Industry 4.0, all the automation. Currently, we are mainly focused on the critical infrastructure, the power, the water, and transportation, where there is a higher need for the cybersecurity, but it will evolve into other segments as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. One of the recent examples about cybersecurity is that on August 5th, TSMC, which is the largest chip foundry company in the world, they just have this problem. It's reported that their staff use the USB to plug in one of the new installed machine without checking that USB. So there was, some problem downloaded to that equipment, and since it's online, so it's affected not only that fab, but the other fab as well. So caused some temporary shutdown. And that problem just caused them 2% of share price drop overnight, which is equal to about $5 billion in terms of market capitalization. This is a big loss, okay? So the slide showed by Tal, the damage caused each year is at 500 billion, okay? But actually, the markets right, the ratio of damage to market is 30-1. So there must be something wrong, and something very, very wrong, okay, about why companies do not have the proper cyber security software or service in place, okay? So that's my first question. So what's the misconcept you usually have from your clients or customers about the cyber security part? So start from Tal.
So I think it's a lot to do because this is a moral hazard issue. So it's very difficult sometimes to actually regulate or to find someone who is responsible. It goes, I think, also way back to the thing that we kind of used to the fact that software and software manufacturers are not having any responsibility on damages that are caused to your systems. And now it's In cyber, it's very dramatic. So I think that what should be done, or what's taking the next step, so first of all, it's to do a lot with it's the issue of governments, of multinational collaboration, also between multinational companies, you know, the ones that actually have a lot of significance on how the cyber space looks for us. And I think it's also to do so. In other sectors, we've seen that insurance is one of the things that is used to handle this kind of threats. But cyber insurance suffers from the same difficulty that all organizations suffer, because they don't have the right model. Cyber acts differently. It's not what used to be is going to be. And this is why their model, they don't have actuary data, and their models are not suitable for this kind of an effect. So hopefully they will find a way, and technologies like ours try to target this very much problem of providing some determinism to their models in a way that they can actually try and help bridge the gap that we've seen here.
Ilan?
I think that if I'm looking on the industrial sector as a place where there is a big gap in terms of deploying on these kind of solutions, it's mainly an issue of lack of understanding, lack of education about the potential hazards into this kind of cases, like happened in TSMC. Nobody assumes that just one of the employees, just not in a malicious way, will put something into their systems. So it is a lot about education and making sure that people understand all the different scenarios where such an attack can be originated, not necessarily from an attacker that will find a way physically how to enter, but maybe like a USB or many other potential scenarios. And the other thing that we try to do when we are looking on the industrial systems is to try and bring, because it's always an issue of ROI, whether you are willing to invest into cybersecurity now before you have seen that it's really providing you value. So what we are trying to do in the industrial space is to have in the same system some additional value, some operational value, and then the operational value will be part of the justification for the system. If you provide asset inventory information and operational validation and so on, then it can be a justification and not just showing that you need to take care of the risk, but there is some real ROI on the other aspects.
Okay. Sebastian?
So there are lots of reasons. Yeah. So I usually start with people. So majority of your security is only as good as your weakest chain, and weakest element in chain is usually people. But if we're talking about technology part, here's my top 4. So first of all, products are inherently insecure. Products or devices. So there's lack of focus, lack of skills in people, and lack of compliances or regulations required when people are delivering, or companies are delivering that software. So as a result, again, majority of the focus in product development or device development is on the new features and not on the quality of devices or security of devices. So that is number 1, I believe, and major factor. Second is that, which is related to the first one, is that products are not designed, they're not built with security in mind. So in a way that even if you have a solution, if you have your fix available for a particular attack, in many cases, or in most cases, you don't have ability to deliver those solutions. This is true kind of everywhere in all enterprises and all consumer products, but IoT is suffering from this much more probably, from my perspective, than any other desktop or enterprise solution. So security, number 3 is security as a field is very easy to get into for the new people. So entry point is absolutely cheap. You don't have to be expert. You don't have to have any skills. You don't need to know basically anything. You can download scripts from internet. Sometimes you don't need to have any account or anything. You just download it, click button, and then suddenly you have access to your friends' Wi-Fi or camera or whatever else. And finally, last but not least, is that security is very cheap. attacks are very cheap. You can hire very experienced security engineer or hacker for $50 per hour. What's even more interesting is that you can buy botnet, gigabit per second traffic, DDoS attack for about $1 per minute. Gigabit is basically something that will kill your network immediately, any device or any website or anything. So as a result, I think that lack of regulation, skills, focus is what is we're facing.
Okay, thank you. So Stephen, there's some question, the common misconcept about cybersecurity.
Okay, actually, I'm just trying to use the past experience, especially I was in a factory before. Okay, for this the cybersecurity impact in the factory, actually identify things. Okay, the first one is the insufficient ability in cybersecurity, especially the personnel in the factory. They are lack of the knowledge of how to handle the cybersecurity incident. That's one. The second one is the visibility. Okay, they don't have a visibility in terms of the machine, also the hardware, software, and they don't know where those machines locate where. So that's the visibility. Okay. The third one is the unclear responsibility. We see this problem still exists in everywhere. Okay. So about the factory cybersecurity, who is going to take responsibility to take it out? Is IT people or engineer people? We see the different company, they have different decision, but there is no standard or policy actually you can apply it. Okay. The fourth one is the legacy liability. We see a lot of old computer system or operating systems still running in the factory because it still can produce, it still can work very well. So they keep in that. That also is the problem. The last problem actually we see is not going to change. It's the pursue productivity. Reason because the manufacturer pursue productivity, they sometimes can override a lot of SOP, override a lot of rule. You cannot blame that because it's very it's competitive world. Okay, in order to pursue the productivity, sometimes they sacrifice the cybersecurity, but as a result, it's going to bring a lot huge damage. Typical example, you can see a couple of weeks ago, the news already mentioned that. Also sad story for us, but that also is a lesson learned. I truly believe for the manufacturer security or IoT security, management issue is matter. Okay, how can we address the management issue? You can either use the people, process, technology, those three major components to build it up, or there's the some kind of way to do that. I believe we still will encounter similar issue in the future, but be prepared. I would say the cybersecurity plan, you need to do it before everything happens. That's some comment based on this incident.
Okay, for Ilan and Stephen, during your presentation, you both mentioned about the IT, OT, and IoT. Okay, since cyber is such a broad area, so we need to define. So what area we're talking about today. So I think most companies will refer to the, which is ongoing is about the OT and IoT. So I'd like you to, can you just elaborate more on this? The going trend is to, in this area, OT and IoT. So start from Ilan.
Yeah, I think that we are focused currently more on the OT side, and what we see is that there is a growing awareness from the customers about the need to deploy a solution. It's mainly an issue of how to do it in a way that will be easy for them, because they have their priorities about the ongoing production, and for them, cybersecurity is not really something that is of interest. They are not interested in learning about cybersecurity, so we need to make it easy for them, and there is a big problem because there are many variants currently of different processes and different solutions. So I think what we are working also on trying to make it happen is to make more and more integrations into the ongoing industrial processes, so it will be something that is part of their process. Like if you look on the industry, safety is an integrated part of every industrial process. We need to get to the place where cybersecurity will be like safety. It will be designed from day one, it will be integrated into the system, and it will also be clear for any industrial operator that they cannot do without it. It's simply illegal, I would say. So that's the target for cybersecurity in the OT space.
Okay, and you also mentioned about education and the budget. I mean, except for these two factors, what are some other issues that regarding the decision making when they decide to make or implement the OT system or solutions?
So I think it's mainly currently because more and more people understand the risk and they understand they need to do something about it. It's a bit of a confusion from the customer side. What do they need to do? Because unlike IT people, they are not going to take 10 different niche kind of solutions and build the overall solution. They need to select one or two solutions, and currently they are just confused. We talked to many customers that just met 10 different or 20 different vendors. Each of them try to explain to them why they are the most important, and then they are just left confused. So there needs to be kind of a blueprint, kind of a structure. What are the 2-3 main components of cybersecurity for OT? And then customers will know we need to buy one of this and one of this to make it simple. That's, I think, something that is missing to solve some of the confusion for the customers.
So still a lot of explanation, education to do.
Yeah, I think it's not just education and explanation from every vendor, because then everybody is pushing to different directions. There needs to be some kind, to some extent, standardization, some kind of a blueprint of what are the main components, and not 20 of them, just 2 or 3 components that you need to have in place, explained in a very simple way. And then the customers will know where they need to put the building blocks of the different solutions.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen, can you elaborate on IoT? Because IoT is going to bring a lot of data in, I mean, much broader than what we know about the internet today. So when it comes to cybersecurity, this is a new area. It was a much bigger area.
Okay, I would say the IoT is a big word, also related to the different vertical and segment. When we try to mention OT, we try to address the manufacturer factory. Especially recently, there's the terminology you mentioned that factory is become sexy again, because a lot of people start looking at this area, which is fascinating. And my personal experience for those IT people or factory guy, actually they are always, asking, tell me how to do it, okay? Or they would say, how much I should invest? The final question is that after I buy everything, it means I'm not able, I'm safe, right? I cannot say yes. There's no certain answer to a yes. But for those things, when you communicate with IT people, it's much easier because they understand that's their daily job. They are handling the cyber attack, how to just read off those kind of attack and do the patching or do the update. But in the OT environment, yes, they're looking for help, but they're also looking for best practice, not just a solution. I think that's a long way to go. That also brings out a lot of opportunity for the star company or new company. They think this is a great area to provide the best service. I also see because I co-work with the company from Israel. I mean, they are brilliant. I would say the technology also pretty advanced. As the cyber security company like Trend Micro, we're willing to cooperate with the company from Israel. Actually, we did it already. Especially, we think it's not just one company can provide the comprehensive solution, because the factory is so big. If you do the support for factory before, you will know it's pretty painful. You need to bunch of people. You also need to have a very good technology support. Otherwise, you will suffer a lot of things. Okay, that's my comment.
And when IoT, one day, which is going to be pretty soon, becomes pervasive, I think a lot of these will be automatic, because you can't have people to check or come back to discuss or educate, right? So all the things need to be in place to solve that problem for IoT to become pervasive.
I think one of the challenges so far is we are encountered one thing is that a lot of things is not able to deploy security after that. So some security probably need to ship before the product go to market, especially the device itself. Otherwise, you probably need to use network protection or the other alternative protection. Another thing is the device in itself is vulnerable because we see a lot of devices. Actually, the open interface because pursue the productivity. For example, the industrial router, industrial switch, they contain a vulnerability because they're using maybe the open SSL library, third-party library, or open source library. It's not under their control. Also, when we call the secure coding, did you follow secure coding in your product or not? It's also different domain of security. We call it embedded security. Embedded security, actually, in a lot of device makers, they are not trying to avoid because they are no such ability to do it in the secure coding. We see the challenge here. We also see there's some opportunity over there because there's a lot of solution out there as a guideline or best practice or principle, how to do the secure coding or secure software development process or life cycle. That kind of practice, we should follow it. That's make sure your product already reaches certain quality of the security. We call it build secure. As a cyber security company like us, what we try to do is keep it secure. We offer a security solution or service to make sure the device is running well. Okay, so that's two different kind of methodology: build it secure and keep it secure.
Okay. Tal or Sebastian have something to add or to echo their points?
I want to say that we want to think of cyber as an enabler and not as a showstopper. There is some comics that you can see a picture of a meeting in a company, board of directors, everyone is arguing, but the chief information security officer is sleeping because he has a hat that says no. It doesn't matter what they're going to discuss, what they're going to say, he is going to say no. We think that this is the reason we run into the situation, because eventually if the cyber inspector, the one that is responsible to protect cyber, doesn't have the way to enable the business safely, then eventually they will enable the business without being safe or take it the other way around. And I couldn't agree more that usually they take it to for productivity, and then they are very vulnerable. So we want to see cyber as an enabler. We want to see something, someone gave me a great example. Cybersecurity measures should be like the brake system in the car. If you have a great brake system, then you will allow yourself to drive faster because you know that once you need, you're going to stop very quickly. And this is our vision, and this is where we want to see cybersecurity measures and technologies go.
Okay, yeah, Sebastian.
Well, it's definitely cyber's enabler, must be. It's also a very dangerous world. No, really, it's so there are about 10 billion IoT devices right now in the world. Imagine 10 billion devices with no security. And I mean, it's very, very easy target. There are very recent examples of attacks which caused 900,000 devices, routers, hacked or shut down. I think that was the case with the one of Mirai bot attacks, or another case, very recent one with 500,000 devices hacked. That was called VPN filter. By the way, both of those are unfortunately involved devices produced in Taiwan here, so I think it's pretty relevant for this topic, for this discussion. So all of these devices, obviously, when the hackers are taking control over them, they can use them for attacking something else, or they can get into your network and get your private files or whatnot. You mentioned cars, Tal, right? So I actually just came from Black Hat last month. I saw a presentation, very interesting presentation. Chinese guys hacked Tesla. How many people have Tesla here? Right? Well, probably not so many, but so they were able to hack Tesla 2 years in a row 2016, they reported that, I mean, they're kind of ethical hackers. So they hacked Tesla, they contacted Tesla, Tesla fixed the hole. 2017, they hacked it again. It was much more complicated, took much more time, but they still were able to press brakes remotely. So literally, you know, it could become, you know, from data security, it could easily become a physical security of people. And by the way, I'm quite sure that these guys who are doing presentations, presentation next year, they will show how they hacked Tesla in 2018. They didn't do it yet, but I'm sure that they will. So overall, it's all pretty scary, pretty dangerous. And if you don't take actions, you don't start taking actions, both security development life cycle with internal or external solutions, running something on device or on the network, or better both. We are just asking for trouble. By the way, there are also, on top of all this personal and kind of physical security, there are also kind of state actors who are actively taking advantage of all these known hacks. And I mean, you know about hacking attacks on during on voting machines or during elections in the United States. By the way, there's 11-year-old kid who hacked a voting machine in States recently. There are lots of cases when state actors were able to penetrate control centers of power grids in both Ukraine and United States, and that could become a matter of national security. So, I mean, must be enabler, definitely, but should be scared probably too.
Okay, and cybersecurity is a broad area, and for example, like the sources of the issue, it could be hacking, it could be infected with virus, it could be internal data theft, breach. So there are many sources of this issue. So for example, if I'm the CEO or high-level executive, when I, you know, how should I prioritize when it comes to the cybersecurity issue? And in the future, could it be not just, you know, I buy the software and install, have someone inside to manage, or it could be a service like a pay-as-you-go? Okay, so, you know.
Yeah, I think that for sure when you are looking on doing, for example, an assessment in order to start and decide where you are starting your priorities, it's always about the combination of the probability, what are the vulnerabilities, what's the probability for each of them, but it's also very important to take into account the specific impact on your operation. Might be something that has a high probability, but in your system it will just maybe turn off the light in a place where nobody is anyhow. So it's important when you are defining your priorities to do this combination of the probability and the impact, and then you just need to decide on a roadmap how to implement things. You cannot implement everything in one day, because it's also important to make sure that you know how to operate system, how to put them as part of your processes. Otherwise, you just bought something. And that also relates to the second part of the service. In many cases, people buy a solution, but they don't know how to operate it. So I think it makes a lot of sense actually to take, when you're looking, for example, on industrial, to take cybersecurity as an external service, because then you also get the experts and the analytics and the industry-wide ongoing improvements, and not just buy a product and then you are left after half a year, you are left with something that is not up to date.
So software as a service is possible in this area, right?
Yeah, I think that it will be mainly not for the very big companies. They would like to have it internally and their own SOC and their own people and so on. But for the mid-size, which are many of them, I think the right thing to do would be to take it as a service. It needs to be done in the right way. So there is an issue of whether you are able to take your data out of the facility or not, and how do you allow people to respond and so on. But it is possible, and I think it should be the target for many of the mid-size companies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the same question for Tal.
I will start with the service. I think that in a very short period of time, we're going to see the service in the SME sector. So I think that SMEs are going to be the next that are going to take care of their cybersecurity, and obviously they cannot do it on-prem, like they're moving to the cloud. So the combination of the fact that you want to see your IT infrastructure in the cloud and the fact that you don't have the capacity or the professionalism to protect it even from remote, then you're going to do it as a service. either through your MSP or through new MSSP providers. Now, regarding prioritization, part of the thing that the logic behind our approach is the fact that we believe that organizations should try and work according to things that are deterministic and try to see what's the maximum damage that you can suffer from some kind of a situation, okay? In the IT and in data protection, we believe this is possible. This is actually the motivation from our point of view, because otherwise you have too much uncertainty, and once again, no CISO can come in the morning and say that he's pretty sure that he didn't suffer a major data breach.
Okay, Stephen?
Just answer back your priority part. Okay, I do agree. I pretty much agree. The cybersecurity need to consider ROI, CapEx, OpEx, because no matter how much you invest, you should get affected. Okay, so when we co-work with the partner, especially like a manufacturer, we develop this certain we call the framework. The way we do that actually from the service model first. Okay, the service modeling actually from the data flow, control flow. We try to identify where is your machine, how the data go. Once we identify the service modeling, the second one we're going to use the threat modeling. The threat modeling is that we try to predict or study in which area mostly is going to happen on security, and we try to write it down each by each. After that, we're going to prioritize. When we say the prioritize is what is the chance is going to happen. So we give the score for different issue or different threat we predict or we assume will going to happen. After that, we're going to suggest a countermeasure. The countermeasure could be Trend solution or our partner solution. We suggest those solutions, you should deploy it. After that is the deployment. When I say deployment, very important. Yeah. We find a lot of companies actually deploy the solution and leave it there because they don't know how to use it or how to operate it. That's very important. After that, they are looking for a service. So the service, we see the huge potential about the SOC, Security Operations Center. Actually, I would say is happening. I think a lot of the outsourced software company, they try to step in this business in Vietnam, also in different area. They request, they want to operate the security operations center or service for manufacturer, for IT or OT environment. I see that's the demand there. I think things are getting better because there's a demand. People will invest it. So that's I would say that's a very good cycle. I mean, we see the things changing. Okay.
Okay. So Sebastian, anything to add?
So on the security as a service, right? And so I actually think that so what we are seeing basically is that first of all, some companies are not willing to use somebody else's SOCs. Right? They don't want to share their data, and they have good reasons, right? I mean, there are lots of cases recently where data was leaked, and you don't know whom to trust or whether those, your security experts actually are securing your data properly. So I actually think that down the road, security as a service will always be, or probably will be, a right solution from technology perspective, because most companies don't have expertise, capacity. It's just going to be cost prohibitive to maintain their own security team, security experts in-house, and implement these solutions for themselves. At the same time, deployment-wise, most likely it's going to be kind of a mix of on-prem deployment or network deployment, cloud deployment. I mean, basically, we are trying to cover all of the solutions, and as well as on-device solutions and up to the cloud. As far as priorities, there were lots of great things already said. One thing I just wanted to reiterate that unfortunately so far what we are seeing a lot is that there are not really a strong motivator for companies to focus on their security. I mean, yes, some CISOs or sometimes CEOs were fired. Not so many, right? Just a couple probably. Yes, you know, we are seeing all these reports about, again, thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices being hacked. But the cost of all these hacks so far have not been really great. And this is where I would suggest, especially again for Taiwan, since Taiwan is a hub of all these IoT vendors, a huge number of vendors. I think that kind of building or establishing kind of security policies which would allow Taiwan to be known in the world as a security center. So basically people who are going for various solutions, they do know that they can trust, say, routers from Taiwan. Probably could become very critical very soon.
Okay. Do you think we have a shot that to compete with Israel in this regard, the security center?
Israel too.
Okay, I think usually, take the factory, for example. I think the demand might be proposed from the VP of manufacturing operation, evaluated by CIO, and finally approved by CEO. If the budget is too big, it probably go to the board for approval. So is there any way, according to your experience, it can simplify the process? Because CEO might not have the knowledge to make the decision. And I mean, VP of operational manufacturing might not know what solution is suitable, and the CIO might not know so well about the operation. So if it involves a lot of process, then it makes it more difficult for the decision making, and it makes maybe the solution not that convenient at the end. So any suggestion to simplify the process when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think, first of all, what is very important is the fact that you have on one hand the IT people, the CISO, and on the other hand you have the operations people. And up till now, up to not long ago, they did not talk too much to each other. They did not even like each other because it was different types of
They don't like each other. Oh.
And I think this needs to be resolved in order to really get to a good deployment of cybersecurity on the OT side. Because if you just let the operations people deploy, then probably they don't really understand the different small features of the different solutions. On the other hand, if the IT people select it, they don't really understand what it means to deploy it. So we see actually that it is becoming better. We see that more and more IT people are involved in the discussion and not just first of all start the discussion with the operations people, which this is what we have seen before. Now we see that more and more the IT people are involved in the discussion. In many cases, they even lead the discussion. And they involve the operations, which I think is a good way forward. Otherwise, the discussion is just going in the wrong direction without having the right know-how. And then I think eventually it does need to go to the management, to the board, because it's always an issue of how much do you invest and what is your risk that you are still keeping and you will not do everything. So it's something that needs to go to be presented to the board saying, these are all our priorities of risk, and we have decided to do just 1, 2, 3 in the next year, and then the rest will remain for the future. So it is a management decision because you have here some risk that will be remaining. But at least on the first step, you can make it more optimized if you will start to work together, the IT and the operations people.
Yes, so what's important is that the spend on the cybersecurity is not just an expense, but it's an investment for the company.
Yeah, I think that this needs to start from the CEO saying that I understand that I need to allocate a budget for that. So that's first of all, it needs to start top down saying you are allowed and you are getting the budget to invest in this area. And then find the right solution and then go back and present this is what we are doing and this is also what we are not doing for now. But it does need to start with allocating some budget, otherwise you cannot really do something meaningful if you don't have the proper budget.
Yes. And Tal, you used to work in the government in charge of the cybersecurity issue, now you're in the private sector. So share with us your experience of how to, kind of simplify or speed up the process when it comes to cybersecurity investment decision?
So actually, a funny story. Now I see some of the investment programs that I was in charge of from the government. Now I want to make an application, and now I realize there's so many details I didn't consider. For example, if it's for growing companies or for starting companies, etc. So now I have some tips. I was just talking with Aaron earlier. So basically, for people who are moving from the government or the security forces, etc., it's a new domain. The one thing that needs to be understood as quickly as possible is that it's not about the technology, it's about the business opportunities, about the market demands. In Israel, we have the tendency to think that if we have a perfect technology, then we are we have done everything that is needed, but eventually find yourself with a solution looking for a problem. So encountering and meeting your end customers, this is very important to bridge the gap. From a government perspective, sometimes we are confused because governments have the power that you don't have as an entrepreneur, etc. So if I was developing some technologies to serve the government, I had the authority to enforce some of the internal customers in the government to use this kind of a technology. And when I'm working in the private sector, then obviously I need to persuade them. And I think this is what we talk about, the ROI, one of the things that one's realize very quickly.
Okay. Stephen, anything to add on this topic?
Okay. About the decision maker part. Okay. I used to be an engineer. Right now, I become a business developer. So I also feel it's very difficult. I would say it's very difficult to persuade them, especially they consider the cybersecurity is an investment. When I say investment, you need to reach out the line of this decision maker. Usually, it will be the CEO, CIO, CISO. Okay. Unfortunately, right now you can see that they have to wait until the incident happens, then start to consider investment. That's the reality. But things are changing. Okay, because the way we did is to provide more information. When I say more information, is something related to the threat, forward-looking, that kind of information. What is changing or what is going on in the dark web or in the cybersecurity area. For those CISO, actually, they can be aware that something is happening. Okay, so every year we try to provide the white paper to predict the new threat or what kind of impact going to happen. That will be one of the key drivers to let the CISO or line of decision maker then make a decision to get a budget. Okay, because when we say about investment, always depend on budget. Unfortunately, I personally want to make the whole decision process in short, but in reality, we're still struggling a little bit about the cybersecurity. They consider as an investment. That's what's happening. But I think soon it's going to change because once the incident happens, we receive a lot of phone calls, then become a business case. It's happening again. But I personally, I don't want to see the cyber incident happen so frequently. But in reality, it is. So that also is another driver as well. Okay.
Okay. And Sebastian?
So I wanted to start with basically stating the fact that I think that we are seeing good positive progress. I mean, I remember times when CISO was basically nobody. It was just a title in the company, somebody with no team, no budget, nothing. I mean, I had personal experience with that, personal relations with, but obviously now with more and more visibility of these attacks, or these hacks, we are seeing that CISOs suddenly started getting more attention, more budget, and more influence within the company. I still believe that it's nowhere close to be enough. And remember, I mentioned before that products are inherently insecure. I mean, we are seeing it everywhere. I personally think that they're becoming probably even worse, just because there are more products, maybe. So in terms of decision making, it's all about costs, right? And I mean, ROI and cost, and it's really hard to predict what exactly your ROI is going to be, just because you don't know what your cost of attacks or hacks is going to be, and so far there are not really huge costs for the companies that were hacked. So in terms of kind of solution, probably raising costs for the companies and going through regulations and compliances probably would be one of the approaches to solve this on a global scale.
And cybersecurity is broad, but it's under is a part of the software industry. Okay, so my next question would be related to the software industry, because in the hardware industry that we know, even you are number 4, number 5, still have your position and market share. But in software industry, if you're number 2, you basically will get out of the market very soon. So so you need to be number 1 in software industry, and you better have a big home market to cultivate the startup to become one. But I think in Israel, I mean, it's a small market, right? So my question is that why is Israel good in not all software, but in some certain sort of software industry? I mean, like the cybersecurity, because even in cybersecurity, it still face strong competition from companies, from the U.S. or from other bigger market countries. So why is Israel good in doing this part, the software industry? So that's my question. So, Tal or Ilan, would you like to address this first?
So, first of all, I think the balance between innovation and the rest of what makes the product and the technology marketable and attractive to customers. I think that when it comes to hardware, it sometimes, if you don't have the manufacturing, you have some legacy issues that Israel is less strong or sometimes even weak in. Sometimes it demands some qualities that we're not leading in. I think that it also has to do going back to where all those people actually were educated and came from. So in the army and the other security forces, they are usually dealing mostly with software. This is their expertise. In fact, one of the debates in Israel now is the fact that because you study to be a great programmer in the IDF, it's a question: what's the relevance of having a graduate degree once you're finished with your service? Okay, once again, it's a difference between being an electronic engineer or being a programmer or even a software engineer. And I think this is this trend, the fact that now we have a very prominent professional route for people that are going from, we even start educating people at junior high schools to learn and understand cybersecurity and the essence of computer science and programming. And they, after 10 years, I mean, they go through high school and then serving for a few years. When it comes to software, they have the world-leading expertise. They don't need to go to the university, and this is why most of the Israeli companies, I think, are based on software and not hardware.
Yeah.
I think it's also a lot about the Israeli Defense Forces. I spent 6 years developing cybersecurity solutions in the Israeli Defense Forces, and there was no economical thinking about it. We developed it because we needed it for the army use, and it was investing a lot of efforts into very advanced development of all kind of cryptography and cybersecurity. And then you just get a lot of knowledge for the people. So once you are getting out of this service, and the service is 6 years for my case, or 3 years for many people, without looking on the economical value, and this is financed by the state, eventually when people are coming out, they are coming out with a head start. So they are coming out already with the expertise that they can develop things much faster, and in software it is easy to then go and do something in a very fast way. You can start your own company, within half a year you can already have a prototype. So that's, I think, a very important starting point. And the other thing is more about the culture. People understand that Israel is not a big market, so people already from day one when they start, they already look and what is my target market. They don't try to sell in Israel. This is never a target market. It is about finding the US, where can I start in the US, or which country in Europe is the right country, or how can I work in Asia? So it is always an external view.
I'm going to ask, what's the percentage of the overseas revenue that comprise the overall revenue of Radiflowe?
Sorry, what's that?
What's the percentage of overseas revenue that comprise the overall revenue of
Basically, more than 90%, 95 or even more percent of that. Basically, everything is exported. The very minor part is targeted at the local market.
So since day one, you're not thinking about Israeli market, right?
No, we were working initially with some customers in Israel because it is very convenient when you are trying out something, when you need to get feedback from the actual deployment, when you need to get some familiarity with some of the actual deployment. It is very convenient, but it was never, our business plan was never, let's see how we grow in Israel. It was always about whether we start in the US or whether we start in UK or Germany or come to Asia. That was always the question from day one.
I assume this percentage might be the same for WeNspire, right? The revenue coming from overseas.
First of all, regarding the previous question, just remember, I think this is another aspect of Israel being a startup nation. So most of the startups start as a garage company, and unless you're Steve Jobs, then software is the really thing that is more convenient to do in a garage, and hardware has some kind of a barrier to start with. Well, WeNspire still is in an early stage, so we don't have sales, but obviously, like any other Israeli company, we are export-oriented, so no one counts about having revenues in the Israeli market, besides having some customers just to start with as a pilot, etc.
Okay, because the reason I asked the question, because in Taiwan we always ask the question that why we do not have the world-leading software industry. We have some independent individual companies, but not the industry. And some people will jump very quickly to the conclusion that because Taiwan market is small, we have 23 million people here. Because when it comes to hardware, it's the standard, right? So whether it's number 4, number 5 in terms of the volume, it can still survive. So in software, unless you're number 1, and since we do not have a big home market, so we cannot have this kind of. So I think it's important that we ask the wrong question in Taiwan. Okay, so I'll bring the question to Stephen, and also to Sebastian, since these are two companies, software companies from Taiwan. So Stephen.
Okay. Remind me, I joined Jamaica in which year? In 1998. Yeah, so almost about 20 years in the software industry. Okay. Actually, I come from a Harvard background. To be honest. Okay. The reason why I'm joining the software company because when I say internet, I see the opportunity because I don't know what is the internet. Okay, so I decided to join that company. It turned out to be a cybersecurity company. Okay, that's not what I expected, but I do learn a lot of things. Okay, yes, market is very important because with the market, you'll be able to grow. I think long time ago, the Jamaica already made a decision. The market is not region; it's market worldwide. Okay, they try to establish the market. No matter in Japan, US, Australia, they let the regional marketing people to make a decision because their responsibility is grow a business. When I say, when you try to create one company, one major mission is not just to provide solution. You try to survive, and you need to make money. It's very important. So that's something I learned. In order to make money, you need to produce the great product. Okay, so that's the circle. Okay, infinite circle. So provide a good quality product, then you can have the market share. Then use the market share to create a new product. So that's the circle that you want to continue to grow. The one thing I learned, okay. Especially in Taiwan, we do see there's market there, but in somewhere it's not the big market, it's in the niche market, which means a niche market still can make money. Okay, the niche market could be you can charge higher. Unfortunately, people still consider want to pursue the volume, want to pursue the other aspect. So if we falling down into that kind of concept, especially the hardware thinking is always pursue the bill of material. Okay, talking about the cost driven. I mean, if you still have that kind of mindset, I think it's difficult to pursue the subscription model business. When I say that, I'm not trying to say the software and hardware. I'm trying to say you pursue the subscription business model. That's a different mindset. As the no matter you're doing the software or hardware, okay, that's one major thing. Unlike us, because we are doing the software business, we pursue the subscription business model. I think that one of the key success is the software. You need to appreciate the effort, the operation. So the people that start to pay for yearly. That's can you sustain your business. Okay, that's one key I learned. Okay.
Okay, Sebastian, and For Shield is from Taiwan, so
yes, and we are probably one of those few companies who are actually more software companies than hardware companies. We are selling hardware solutions, hardware-based solutions as well, but our software is pretty much hardware independent. We can run as a software plugin. We can run on our partners' boxes, or we can sell our own hardware-based solution. So what I noticed, luckily in Taiwan, there are quite a few talented engineers who, especially people who were working on a hardware-based companies, but there is lots of overlap and kind of niche points when people even though they're working for hardware companies, they're still producing software. We were lucky to find several really great engineers. So there is that niche, there is this segment in Taiwan of people with software, good software experience, but definitely at this point of time, I think Taiwan is more, especially considered to be more a hardware focused, I think, and we have more hardware expertise, at least in the world. Again, there is good number of talented engineers doing software. It's just, again, percentage-wise, probably it's still, perception is still correct.
Okay. So the last question will be, what do you see in each other's strength, and if we like to strengthen the partnership between Taiwan and Israel regarding the software industry, what would be your suggestion? So, I mean, we're glad to see that Trend Micro already had presence in Israel to leverage the local talent and the resource. And we also see some Israeli companies come to Taiwan to work with the hardware companies to come up with a solution or integrated products. So, I mean, based on that, if we want to develop in the software industry, not just come up with individual companies, but the industry in general, software industry, what's the strength that you see in Taiwan, and what can be done to further strengthen that partnership? Start from Ilan.
I think that what I've seen in the very short time that I'm here and learning about the country is that you need to leverage what you have here. And from my point of view, one thing is related to what we discussed about AI, is that you need a lot of data to train the systems. You have here data because you are selling, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of routers and devices and everything that is related to hardware. you can use this install base in order to get a lot of data to train all kind of more advanced security algorithms, and I think that's a place where we can share some collaboration. The same also about all the industrial sectors, all the manufacturing areas. You have it much more than in Israel. Again, it can be a source of data in order to have more advanced cybersecurity solutions.
Okay. And Tal?
I think it was mentioned in the morning session, there are various ways to tighten the collaboration and have more ties between companies and countries. I think that some of the ideas that were raised that people from Taiwan would come for a significant period of time to Israel, either to do their PhD or postdoc at the Israeli universities, or as the head of the Innovation Authority mentioned, to work in Israel for a few years. I think in a similar way that we have described how Israelis gain added value by having multinational companies present in Israel, I think the same way if people from Taiwan would come to Israeli software companies, I think this could be very beneficial for them and for Taiwan as well. In addition to the fact that it could raise many collaborations in the sense of leveraging data there is in Taiwan. I think that the Taiwanese government should also look, I think some of the models, the model of the Israeli Innovation Authority I think is very successful. I don't know what exists here, but it should be learned and to see if it can be implemented here. But above all, I think that sometimes you also need to go with your strengths. So it might be that Taiwan should stay leading in hardware and make sure that they have the right collaborations with software companies.
I think on that point, I think actually it's a very good point. For example, we are producing software and we are always looking for which platforms we can sell them on because the customers always wanted a full tested, a full solution. So I think that's a place where it can also be a good place to collaborate, to have the big vendors, the hardware vendors from Taiwan, be more adapted to work with the hundreds and thousands of Israeli startups, because it's not easy to work with the hundreds and thousands of small companies. That's a place where we can leverage the strength of Taiwan together with the nature of Israel with all these Israeli startups.
Thank you. And Trendmicro already have presence in Israel, so to further strengthen the partnership, so what are some of the things that can be done in the future?
Actually, my team already done several business cases with Israel. We have the branch office over there. Yeah, it's co-work very well. I do see the similarity between the Taiwan and Israel. Okay, these two countries actually government under attack, so we're pretty strong. Okay, in terms of the cybersecurity because there's an environment there, and I do see. In the future, because you mentioned one thing is very important. Software cannot sustain alone. We need to attach with something, operating system or hardware. So Taiwan, we're very strong in hardware. I think software, combine hardware together. How to combine it together as the product or service. And the market is worldwide. Definitely the market is out there. That's one thing we can think about. Another thing is, I truly believe, because based on my friend, I have a lot of friends in the hardware CEO. They're doing it, and they go to Israel. They went to Israel looking for solution. That is already happening. Also, they try to have a joint venture. So I think the collaboration is happening. I'm no doubt about that, and I also see that's a great opportunity for not just the business engagement. Maybe we can deep down in the development or R&D engagement. For example, hackathon. We have a Hackathon, okay? They are white hacker, okay, white hat hacker. And maybe there's some information based on that event. We can exchange a lot of information in R&D side, in the technology side. that's something we try to see it happen in the future.
Thank you. That's a good point. I think based on the hardware experience and infrastructure and leverage the solution or software to combine, that's one thing. But I think it's important that we do not sit passively here in Taiwan to be found. We need to explore aggressively to find new value to be created.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, first of all, this is absolutely this global world, right? And there is no really, there are no boundaries, and everybody hopefully understands now that tariffs don't work, that we, it's much better to collaborate than to try to split by some factors, be it country lines or some, hardware versus software. There are certainly lots of strength in Taiwan on hardware front, but there are also, I believe, lots of great potential to start building great software here as well. So, collaboration in any form, I believe, will be absolutely beneficial for both companies level or countries level. It just probably would not be putting boundaries between hardware and software here.
That's right. Thank you. So thank you for panelists for sharing your experiences. I think it's interesting that I think from Israel we learned that you need to ask the right question. Also, you need to dream the impossible. For example, like Mr. Aaron. This morning, he himself is from the private sector to government. But for Tal, you're the opposite. You're from government to private sector. I think the talent flow is important because that's one way to exchange and experience, expertise, connections. In Taiwan, we seldom have, the people from private sector to government. I think we have two. One is the minister, Lin Xinyi, from an automobile company, and the other is the premier, Zhang Sanzhen. He used to work for Google. But I think that's the only two examples I can think of. I think in Israel there are a lot, right? And also, I can't think of any government official to private sector. We have some government official when they retire, they go to state-owned companies, maybe be the chairman or the manager, general manager, but it's basically not help to run the company. So I think that kind of talent flow is also important. It's something we learn from Israel too. So thank you very much and for sharing all your experience and insight. We look forward to having you back here soon again. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our applause to thank our moderator and our panelists. Let's take a group photo, shall we? Please. 各位，感谢您今天的与会，谢谢您参加我们2018台以创新论坛。麻烦同步口译耳机请归还。然后呢，您的意见对我们来说非常宝贵，所以呢，我们扫描 QR code， 这个是您可以填问卷的，谢谢。那么另外呢，除了这个 QR code 之外呢，明天我们有在三创一个交流茶会创新交流茶会，与我们今天的语谈者还有呢演讲者来进行深度的交流，也是要扫描 QR code。好，这个就是明天的。Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Taiwan and Israel, we work together for cybersecurity. 各位，如果您有同步口译耳机的话，拜托请归还，谢谢谢谢。再次，我们这个 QR code 是我们明天台以创新交流茶会在三创，您扫描 QR code 就可以参加。我们邀请您，还有我们今天的语谈者、演讲者来做深度的交流。我们邀请创业的团体、新创的团体一起来交流。明天在三创，谢谢。